All right, I'll call the meeting to order at 7:02.
Depends on which clock you look at.
Yeah, it depends on which clock. I want to thank everyone for coming. For the board tonight, we have Janet, Alan, Ginny, Milton, Lynn, Shari, Nancy, Dick, and Andy. I do expect Chow and Greg to show up a little bit later. For staff, Susan. Remind everyone that this meeting is being streamed and recorded. And if by any chance you're calling in, please remember to put your phone on mute until you want to actually say something. The feedback comes in. Okay. 5 civility principles. Speak kindly, don't speak ill. Accept and give constructive criticism. Apologize earnestly. Respect others' opinions. Respect other people's time. Announcement of closed meetings. There was a closed meeting of the Risk Management Committee on September 27, 2018. Committee members were Nancy, Milton, Susan, and Sherry. The vote to close was 4-0-0. The reason to close was for consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. The meeting was closed at 6:33 p.m. and opened at 6:55 p.m. The purpose was to review general liability, self-insurance program, and claims activity. There was a closed meeting of the Board of Directors September 27, 2018. In attendance were Dick, Janet, Alan, Milton, Nancy, Greg, Andy, Ginny, Shari. The vote to close was 6-2. Dick, Janet, Alan, Nancy, Greg, and Shari against Ginny and Andy. The meeting was closed under Section 1 and Section 3. 1 is discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and 2 is consultation with legal counsel on legal matters. Meeting was closed at 10:37 p.m. and opened at 11:50 p.m. Purpose of the meeting was discussion concerning release of closed minutes and matters concerning an employee. There was a closed meeting of the Architectural Resource Committee on Monday, October 8th, 2018. Members were Sherry Faneroff, Deb Block, Tom Mungle, Gracie Bradford. The vote to close was 4-0-0. It was closed under Section 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation. The meeting was closed at 1:07 p.m. and opened at 1:48 p.m. And purpose was discussion of new and ongoing covenant cases. So there was a closed meeting of the Board of Directors on October 11, 2018. Dick, Lynn, Alan, Milton, Nancy, Greg, Andy, Ginny were in attendance. The vote to close was actually taken at the September board meeting. See your minutes. It was closed under Section 3, consultation with legal counsel on legal matters. Meeting was closed at 10:30, opened at 11:30, and the purpose of the meeting was a potential legislation. So that is all the closed meetings I have. We want approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Ginny. Is there a second?
Second.
Lynn. Lynn got in. Lynn got in first. I would like to ask for 2 changes. One, under item number 10, can we flip D and C? We'll let the communication process go before we tackle Symphony Woods. And then Chow had asked if we could just delay Patuxent Trail until 7:30. Yep. Yes, Alan.
What's the purpose of the switch?
Basically, the thought was that Symphony Woods is going to take us a long discussion.
Slated for the same amount of time as the one above it, so why not move it up above that one as well?
Because we have Gateway and immediately feeding into Gateway comes the.
But you were switching C and D and not switching D with up above B. At least that's what I heard you say.
Okay.
Or A.
Well, A, we have a guest coming.
So why not put D after A is my question.
Any problem with that? Nope. All right, we can do that.
So where are we now?
We're going to put D after A. Number 10. All right. Any other changes proposed? If not, all those in favor of the amended agenda?
Aye.
Looks unanimous. Greg?
This is Greg.
Sal?
Yes. This is Greg.
Thanks, Greg. All right, residents speak out. Thank you. First up, Ginger Scott. Welcome, Ginger.
Thank you, Andrew.
Did you you gave us testimony?
Yes, but this is, I'm giving you tonight the abridged version.
Okay.
Abridged version, somewhat abridged. Good evening. I'm Ginger Scott, and I live in Wild Lake. Tom and I found your 10-12-18 discussion of Fairway Hills both interesting and alarming. We have several suggestions. First, review existing CA documents that describe some of the constraints and challenges in the land itself. The Allview feasibility study, Howard County Golf Course study, which evaluated 5 potential sites for a county course and ranked CA's last out of 5. Modifications proposed by CA to counter negatives in the county study. CA survey of resident preferences for CA facilities. Golf ranked last or very low. CA consultants report on wildlife impacts for a 9-hole and an 18-hole golf course. CA's plan for a passive park butterfly garden instead of a golf course. CA's financial projections that showed a 9-hole course would produce a greater return on investments, though an 18-hole course would have greater total profits. Report in which Rob Goldman attributed the course's underperformance to staffs not anticipating the greater popularity of 9-hole play. Second, compare and contrast Fairway Hills with golf course safety guidelines of the Urban Land Institute and a golf course design seminar that Dennis Maddy attended. Third, compare and contrast the actual stream buffers on the course with those in the plans permitted by the state and county. Fourth, expand your definition of community to include CA assessment payers who must provide exorbitant subsidies to keep the course open, CA environmental staff, owners of adjacent property, CA's climate change and other environmental committees. Fifth, review contracts that may obligate CA to operate a golf course on this land for any period of time. Sixth, determine the impact on values of abutting properties if a golf course reverts to open space. CA staff or board must have averred that the golf course would increase values of neighboring properties. CA's general counsel, therefore, advised that because his property abutted one iteration of the course, Joe Murphy should recuse himself from the vote. Straight Arrow Joe, believing his integrity was being impugned, stunned the board and audience with his impassioned resignation. We were surprised that, after all the brouhaha over the belated notice to King's Contrivance about the Patuxent Branch Trail and to other villages about closing neighborhood centers, there was no notice to Fairway Hills neighbors about potential changes to the golf course. I have Tom has signed up for the last two sentences. Do you want him, or shall I finish?
Oh, no, we'll bring Tom up because he signed
Okay.
up.
Okay.
But thanks, Ginger. Any
Okay.
questions for Ginger? No.
I'll
Thank
see
you,
later.
Ginger. Tom?
Thank you all. I got to.
Okay.
Potential changes to the golf. Okay, we think.
30
Okay.
seconds.
Yeah.
Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. In case you're wondering what happened to me, I fell on a sidewalk about 3 days ago. Probably broke my nose, but I've looked worse in the past couple of days. Doesn't hurt. I don't know where she was. We were surprised that after all the brouhaha over the belated notice to King's Contrivance about the Patuxent Branch Trail and the other villages about closing the neighborhood centers, there was no notice to Fairway Hills neighbors about the potential changes to the golf course. We think they deserve a place at your table and hope you will ask them to join you. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Thank you.
I have one other
Oh,
thing
wait a
I'd
minute.
like to bring up.
Okay, wait, Alan
Oh.
has. Okay,
It's his time, so let him
sure.
finish.
Tom, keep going.
One other thing. I read the stuff that Dan Burns put out for this meeting, and I'd like to comment that Dan has looked at only 2 bridges, and all the same kind of bridges, namely fixed bridges. I submit that there's a third kind of bridge that you might want to consider, and that is a bridge designed to fail in the case of a flood. The Army Corps of Engineers has built hundreds of these things. They're strong, they can hold an Abrams tank. And the way they do it is by putting pontoons across the river, and they anchor one end of the pontoon bridge very securely and the other end of the pontoon bridge very insecurely. So when the water rises, the insecure end pops up and flows downstream, but is held in place by the secure end. The day the water recedes, you go retrieve the end that flew downstream, bring it back, attach it to where it was, and you've got a bridge back. You've spent one day in getting the bridge back, and you don't have to buy a new bridge every time it floods. I think that should be considered as well.
Thanks, Tom. Alan?
Tom and Ginger, if you have a thought about this as well. Given the thoughts of all the potential uses of the golf course, what are you in favor of, or briefly, or what would be the impact of, do you think, on residents of some of the different options we started to look at?
2 things. A lot of people like to live next to a golf course, but I think what they like to live next to is a big green field that constitutes the golf course. We lived next to a big green field called open space before CA came and took it over and put a golf course there. I much preferred the big green field to the golf course. The golf course is noisy. You have moors out there at 7 o'clock in the morning. You have people yelling and screaming, sometimes using profanity and things like that. It was much quieter with the big green field out there before you put the golf course. Other people, I think, would feel the same way. Well, some of the people like to live next door to the golf course, but they haven't lived there when there was a big green field.
So in terms of quiet, some of our uses are family-oriented, which
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea, might bring more noise, or a different kind of noise,
Well,
but
but-
more noise.
Before the golf course came, the neighborhood kids played on the open space. They played softball there in the summer. They played football in the fall and soccer in the spring. They flew kites out there. A wonderful place to fly kites because there weren't any trees. And so, I mean, the open space was used not in any formal way, but informally by the kids in the neighborhood and adults too. People sledded on it in the wintertime.
So would you be in favor of us putting a more formal, family-oriented facility?
I would,
somewhere
yes.
there? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That's all I have on the list for residents to speak at. Any other? No, thank you. I'll pass this down to Valerie. Marks. I submitted them in writing. Just a couple of things. I went to CA 101 for a while before I had to go off to the Oakland Mills Village Board. And it was a very nice presentation. I want to thank staff for putting that on. Dick and I have done 8 of the village boards, and I think they've been very fruitful sessions. We got a lot of good questions and a lot of good comments at the meetings. Okay. All right, let's do the Inner Arbor report. Any questions on the Inner Arbor report? Dick?
Lynn, I see that you've been pretty busy and a lot of great activities. I noticed in there you've hired a landscape architect.
Right, we left the contract for the.
And what's in the contract? I mean, what are you asking for them to do?
Okay, I can't give you check numbers on that, Dick. Sorry. I'll have to defer to Nina.
Yeah, could we get a copy of it, or just get an idea what's planned?
Again, I don't know whether that's normal procedure or not for one group to another, but
Well, no,
there's
I'm
nothing
curious
secret
because
about
we are
it.
talking about putting in pathways, and I'm just wondering how this is all going to coordinate as part of the big picture, and maybe
This is all part of the same picture. You'll hear more about it.
well, after the fact or
No, tonight.
tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny?
Yeah, if I understand this part of the report about the Symphony of Lights and the hospital, I think congratulate you guys because you're now receiving revenue, which I don't think you did in the past.
We will be receiving substantially more revenue than we received in the past. So.
Okay, well, that's great. Good job.
Exactly. No, I mean, again, it's different. I think the relationship has matured, and I think there's great potential there for everybody. So that's a good thing.
Dick?
Oh, I noticed that I didn't see any Halloween stuff up this year. Is that not going to happen anymore?
No.
Was that profitable last year?
Pardon?
Did you make any money on that last year?
No. You did not.
Any other questions? All right. Consent agenda. Actually, I got an email asking that we delay the minutes for September 27th board meeting until November. So I just kind of gotten that in. So we'll do that. All the rest of them we'll approve. Okay, go on. Fairway Hills Golf Clubhouse. Do that in 10 minutes. Welcome, Dan.
I can answer any questions if anybody has any. The recommendation from staff.
Was there a county golf course there before Allview Golf Course? I mean, before Fairway, was there an Allview Golf Course the county owned?
I do not know that.
There was.
Because I'm hearing it was open space, but was there a golf course there before? I thought there was.
Okay, so there was a golf course called Allview Golf Course,
what I thought,
but
yeah.
it was a private. It was not county owned. It was a private, and
But
then
it
Rouse
was
bought
a golf course before, is what it wasn't just open fields.
Yeah, I'm getting. I think I've been told that it was a dormant golf course that we let go and then reinvigorated.
Did we let go, or did all of you?
I don't know that somebody let go. That's why I'm trying to be careful because I don't know that before my time.
Okay. I had remembered something, I thought in the 70s. Okay.
So what you're asking us tonight is basically just the question on the bridge
Correct.
to either do the 250 or the 500.
Yes.
That's the question. Janet.
investigate any options? Like Tom Scott was suggesting a bridge that could potentially release or.
Can't hear. No.
That would be Mr. Maddie's territory, not mine.
Would you like to invite him to join you? Can you two sit together at the same table?
Dennis, come join me, please. What was the question? Have you investigated a pontoon bridge or other bridge options?
We've looked at a longer span fiberglass bridge, but we have not looked at a floating bridge.
Is that because we tend to build them ourselves, or because?
Well, we do tend to build them ourselves, and even if it's a fiberglass bridge, we would assemble the components in-house. But I hadn't even considered a pontoon.
I mean, that sounds. to me
Dennis,
like
can
a
you
good
speak
idea.
into the mic?
I have the same problem. Only because, it has flooded a couple of times, so we don't know when the next time will be. And is that something that we could look into?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That sounds like a good suggestion.
Alan, and then Ginny.
What's the impact of not
Yeah,
replacing the
sorry.
bridge at all?
We have lost between the two bridges, so it's kind of a little misleading because we only had 1 year to recover in between. But we're down about 10,000 rounds, a little over 10,000 rounds at Fairway Hills.
What's the dollar value of 10,000 rounds?
The average round is about $35 per round.
That's $350,000. Is that all profit to us, or do we have costs associated with those $350,000?
The cost is, if we have the cost no matter, they're fixed cost. So people not playing costs us money.
So what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you correctly, the bridge will pay for itself likely in the first year if we get back
Yes.
most of those.
Yeah, that's why we're here asking, we need to replace the bridge. Because even if we do decide to do something different, it's several years down the road, and the cost will just accumulate annually if we don't do something in the interim.
Ginny, and then Dick.
Two questions. One, do we really know the 10,000 rounds are because, drop-off is because of the bridge? Because we had gotten some emails saying part of it is just what the product we're offering and what we're not doing compared to competition in the area. I believe John D. Tomaso was one, Carl Smith was another one that we got. So, do we really know it's all the bridge?
I would say yes, because the conditions are the same as they were before the bridge washed out. So the product didn't, the only thing that changed about the product from before the bridge washed out and now is the bridge washing out. So if people weren't playing the course before, and we're not talking years, we're talking 2 years ago.
Okay.
So.
No, it's just recent. Okay. The second thing, in terms of the concerns that were raised about neighbors and others, do you feel you have a process in place where if we were to approve a bridge now, the cheaper bridge, so that people could use the 18 holes, but in fact that would allow you to begin to look at other options? Would you be involving the community? Do you have an actual process where there'd be some hearings, et cetera?
Well, I have not taken the time to develop a process because we won't have it there's not a need for it until it's approved. And we're busy building the athletic club, so, but that's the whole goal, is that I did not that's why I specifically didn't make any recommendations, because there needs to be a process in this. That's why I was very careful and very adamant in the last meeting not to get into the weeds, because we didn't get there because there hasn't been a process. We're just asking if we should develop one so we can move forward.
You would assure us that if we vote for that, you will have a process that will involve a lot of people?
Yes.
Okay.
Dick, and then Alan, and then Shari.
That bridge that has to be replaced, it provides pretty much the only access to the northwestern part of the golf course. The next bridge is way to the south, so regardless of what we do with the golf course, whether we go to a 9-hole golf course or to other activities or whatever, we're going to need a bridge there if we're going to utilize that entire, all that acreage. I had suggested you take a look at the county bridge that's about 100 yards upstream that has survived flood after flood. Has anybody checked that out to see if that's...
You're talking about the metal bridge?
Yeah, the metal
Correct.
bridge just to the north of the highway there.
We had looked at metal bridges previously and found them to be much more expensive, but we'll take another look.
Because if we're going to put a bridge in, we should put a bridge in that's going to last. I mean, this putting a new bridge in every 2 years is really not financially wise.
Alan and then Shari.
At the risk of being argumentative, I just want to make sure that you understand my definition of a lot of people. That's not about the number of people, it's about the types of people, and starting from nearby people and others, golfers who are interested, and so on and so forth. It's not about the number of people, it's about the community. So that's what I'll be looking for. You talked about nothing has changed in terms of our product. Has anything changed in those 2 years or whatever period of time we're talking about in terms of the competitive landscape that might have also contributed to the drop in our rates?
No, the only thing that's really changed, I'm sorry. The only thing that has even slightly changed is, what's the county course?
A county course.
Troy Hill.
Yeah, Timbers of Troy, I think, rebuilt their bunkers. Other than that, the competitive landscape has remained the same.
Shari.
Yeah, I'm just gonna looking at options. So a bridge that is going to last would be great, but how about while we're examining the possible uses in the future and maybe thinking about changing some of the offerings, is there something that can be temporary, some different kind of material? I know that CA always builds stuff that's beautiful, and so the aesthetic is really important. But in this case, is there something that we could do that would not be simply a replacement of the good stuff that was there before, but something that's a little bit cheaper, a little bit more temporary until we figure out what it is this is going to look like, that would buy us some time for some real planning? I know it has to be safe. Couldn't it be cheaper?
As it turned out, the last bridge was pretty temporary.
Beautiful,
But with
temporary,
that
so
being
that's not gonna work.
with that being said, there are weight requirements. There's truck traffic that goes across it, and it has to be a certain width. I'll make sure that we build it as inexpensively but nicely as we possibly can, and if we'll look at other options as well. But I'm not sure we could. I'm not sure there's a lot more value engineering that can go into that bridge. But I hear what you're saying.
Okay, so is that
That's
all right?
just good. I'm aware that, like in our village, we had a situation with a bridge over a road in this case, that we as a board decided it was better to fix it than to tear it down, because tearing it down was going to cost a lot. So one cost that I don't think is in here is we have this temporary bridge. If we choose to go with something else because we either want a more permanent bridge or because we want some other use of the property, what's the cost of getting rid of what you're going to build, besides your tears as you watch what you build?
It really depends on what the community ends up in that space, how much of that comes out.
Let's assume we have to take out the whole bridge. What's the cost of moving the bridge?
I can't guess that right now. I can find that out, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
I mean, it was pretty expensive.
It's not as expensive. So you're not working over top of a roadway, and it's not precast concrete construction. So I think it would be relatively inexpensive, especially versus the overpass.
Okay, so the recommendation is the $250,000 bridge. So is there a motion to authorize spending up to $250,000 on a bridge for Fairway Hills? Janet moved.
Second.
Ginny seconded. Any discussion? Nancy?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Greg? Nancy?
We don't have a definitive anything any options yet, do we? I mean,
Yeah.
he's,
It was either a $250,000 or a $500,000 bridge.
oh, sorry. I did read it, but I went right past it.
Aren't we also going to get something else?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to look into other options.
Right.
Oh, no, that's for the golf course, right?
Oh, just the course itself. Well,
What-
doesn't
what-
that tie
And for a
into the need of the
permanent
bridge?
What I heard Dennis say was he will explore options to produce the least expensive bridge that will meet the requirements, and we're putting a cap on of 250.
But
I
Andy, he
think
also
what-
said that he would explore
But
the.
I think
Yeah.
what Nancy's saying is something
If-
different.
If there are going to be other options to the course,
Right.
why wouldn't we make a decision about how much we're going to spend on the bridge when we understand the whole package rather than?
Because that's gonna be down the road, way down the road. We need to replace the bridge now to give us time to figure out what we wanna do with the course that may
Okay.
include the bridge as is or something different.
Wait, Greg's in the queue. Greg,
Yeah, I thought Nancy was going to say is why the heck are we deciding to spend $250,000 when we don't know what the long-term plan is for the golf course? I just don't recall us doing anything like this in the past, and my preference is that we actually see a plan and we approve a bridge at a particular price, and then that price takes into consideration whatever long-term plan is. This is a lot of money, $250,000, and I don't see the rush for it right now, given that we're at the end of the summer season. We have time to do it. So I'm going to vote no. And I'm going to vote no because I don't feel like we have enough information to commit $250,000 worth of residents' funds to something that may be entirely unnecessary.
Milton, do you want to address?
Yeah. Well, to Nancy's point, and also what we're trying to say is that right now we have a very convoluted way of getting to. We have one of the bridges missing on hole 6. We need to do something. What we're coming to you asking is what's the options if we go with the roughly to $250,000 bridge. That will be in place. We'll put that in place while we look at long-term options for a reconfiguration of the golf course. Or the other option was to spend $500,000 or more for a much sturdier bridge and not look at additional options.
But Chow hasn't had a chance. Chow?
Sure. So I think I agree with what Greg said. So if we spend $250 and then $1,000, then we find a problem. It's not compatible with the long-term plan. It's kind of waste of money. And I just think about it, maybe we need to take some time. It's the winter time, right? And we probably have more time to evaluate.
No, what we're trying to say is going to take is going to be a multi-year effort to come back with options. Right now, you heard Dan say we're losing roughly 10,000 rounds because we don't have that bridge. What we're trying to do is that put a cheaper bridge in place, but a safe bridge that allow us to do a long-term look at the golf course that may have where we can bring back to the board different options, including the possibility of a 9-hole golf course with other amenities. But in the meantime, we need to spend some money on a bridge, whether it's the $250,000 to have a golf course where the golfers can use, and we can try to recapture some of those rounds that we're losing.
All right, I think
Ginny
had
before me.
Ginny and Alan and Dick.
If we voted for the 500,000, it's over. You build that, it's going to be an 18-hole golf course. It's over. Issues, right? If we vote for the 250 or less with a lot of ideas about how maybe you could be creative about what you put there, then we have a lot of options available. My only concern is I would hope that it wouldn't be a multi-year process. I would hope you could do it a lot faster than that, because there's a very good chance that with climate change and everything that you're going to lose that bridge. So I would hope we have the options in place. We voted on the options, and that we have a plan for the other X number of holes if in fact we want to change how that golf course functions. So that's how I understand. So the vote now is the 250 so that people can play golf. Now, I'm sure there are still some people that are playing golf, and we've lost some because it's so difficult to make it, to get around there.
We've lost about a third of
Yeah,
a
but
third
I
of the
mean,
rounds.
they'll still be playing. It's not like they're not playing anymore. If we can get that other bridge in, people do play longer time, and so we really have to do that. If we want to look at the other options, we have to vote for the $250,000 bridge or less. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the only option we really have if we want to look at other options.
Alan?
So I'm sympathetic to the argument of not wanting to spend or double spend residents' money.
Yeah.
But I'm also hearing, and I'm not sure if the two of you heard the data, that right now we lost this last year $350,000 worth of income. So that would pay for the golf course. So the only way to, if we kept the situation the way it is and did another year of golf at Fairway Hills, we'd lose them again likely and suffer similar or greater loss. So the only way to not spend it right now, it seems to me, is if we, the staff, and us can find a way to saying, no, we can have a plan in place and have it constructed in time for next year, and I don't see that happening. I realize it's a little weird to say, here it is, October, November, let's spend money on the golf course that people are going to stop golfing on anyway, but I don't see a way for us not to have golf there next year as an 18-hole course. And if we're going to have golf as an 18-hole course, I'd rather spend $250,000 than lose $350,000.
Dick?
Well, as I said, that corner of the golf course, regardless of what we use it for down the road, is going to need a bridge crossing the stream to get there. And so we need to put a bridge in, and as Alan pointed out, we need it by spring. So let's put a bridge in.
Shari? And then
So this bridge has been built twice now, and this would be the third time?
This would be the second time.
Second replacement.
All right, so how much did it cost? How much has this bridge cost previously?
We didn't break this bridge out from the rest of the boardwalk and bridges when we constructed it the first time.
So you don't know?
I don't, and actually I don't know the total cost for the original construction. I can look it up, but I don't know that number off the top of my head.
So you're saying this is the first time that bridge has been washed out?
That bridge, yes. The other bridge was washed out before.
Okay, so the bridge
Six.
has been washed out twice. The bridge over over that same stream has been washed out twice. So I'm trying to get some idea of what the costs of those other two bridges were.
So we reconstructed the bridge that between, I guess it's six. That ended up costing this time $80,000 approximately. It was not as expensive as we anticipated. We didn't lose as much of that bridge and boardwalk system as we lost previously. So we were able to put it back, and $80,000 is not cheap, but we were able to put it back fairly economically. So that one wasn't terribly expensive this last time.
Okay, so if that was 80,000, and you're asking for 250,000?
It's a much different situation. It's a longer bridge. There's more boardwalk. So several of the pilings were still in place at 6, so it wasn't anywhere near as expensive as this would be.
This was more devastating.
Yes.
Greg?
Yeah, I just want to respectfully disagree with Dick. I don't see this place as necessarily needing a bridge any more than any other place we need a bridge. It's nice having a bridge there. We need a bridge if it's a golf course, but if it's not a golf course, I don't see we need a bridge there. And that's where, again, I'm not convinced the long-term plan is necessarily golf. And the idea of spending $250,000 for a disposable bridge is too much. If it were $25,000, okay, I could swallow that. But $250,000, that's to me, that is at least serious money that you don't just say we're going to throw it, we're going to spend it, and understanding that we could be in this position next year, and then we've lost it. The bridge has been built, washed out twice. The weather, things are getting better. Again, I just think it's too much money for a disposable bridge, which is essentially what I think we're being asked to vote for. So I don't agree with that.
Point of clarification, Greg, this bridge has not been washed out twice. The bridge over hole 6 has been washed out twice. This is the bridge over hole 18, and this was washed out in 2018.
Well,
But the point I like to ask the board is that I like for you to look at the big picture. What we're asking is that let us move forward on replacing the bridge, because what I would like for us to do is look at the option on some of the options we can do with that golf course, because as I said the last time, speaking only for myself, and it's going to be a board decision, but we built a golf course in the floodplain, and looking ahead, I don't know whether that's the best place for a golf course. And so I would like for us to look at the options. And, as we said the last time, one of those options will be a 9-hole golf course and giving up the area that's right now is in the floodplain. So I ask, let us move forward, look at the big picture, and come back with a plan. And the board will have a decision what we're going to do with Fairway Hills in its totality.
Okay, so I'd like to.
Easy
Janet.
question. I'm just wondering time frame in terms of building the new bridge. How long will that replacement take?
It really depends on the availability of contractors. So, as I like to say, they're not sitting around waiting for my phone call. So if they've taken a bunch of extra work, it could take a couple months. It really depends on where they are in their scheduling.
And so would that allow us options to look into alternatives? For the bridge? I don't mean
We'd have some time.
All right, I'm going to call the question because we're
Andy, I have a
past the time.
question.
Oh, Chow.
So what happens if in the future we build this kind of temporary bridge, and then we said, okay, that does not fit the plan. We need another $500,000 to build a new one. Would that be possible? Scenario?
So we're hoping it's not a temporary bridge. And we're hoping it's.
Yeah, it's not temporary,
But
the way we describe it's kind of temporary.
Well, it's not strong enough to stand up to a flood if a similar flood happens. It's not
Correct.
designed to be a
It's not the
rickety
straw
temporary
house, it's the stick house.
Right.
All right, let's.
So my point is not it being washed away. Is in the future we think the plan will change. We need a permanent, much stronger bridge, and then we need to destroy the one existing. So would that be possible scenario, or that will not happen?
If we decided to build a much stronger bridge, you certainly could take that one out and put a stronger one in. But I'd like to hope that we would be able to use some parts of what's there in a different bridge. That's my.
All right. So the recommendation in the motion is to approve up to $250,000 for new bridge. All those in favor? Okay. Janet, Alan, Chow, Ginny, Lynn, Nancy, Dick, Andy. Opposed? Sherry and Greg. Motion passes. All right, we're going on to the Little Patuxent Trail. Nancy?
I move that we reconsider the vote that we took about the easement at the last meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, so there's a motion we reconsider the vote, where we basically turn down the easement. Any discussion? All those in favor?
The impact of this motion, that we just
Then we can
reopen it.
Gotcha. That's how we have to reopen it. All those in favor? 1, 2.
Dick, second.
So Janet, Alan, Chow, Ginny, Lynn, Greg, Nancy, Dick, Andy. Opposed? Sherry. Right. Okay. All right. So now we're back to talk about the Patuxent Branch Trail easement. Greg, I know you had a.
Yeah, I commented on this that I would like to see the easement reflect the size of the trees that we'd like the county to put in this area once it's finished construction, number one. And number two, John McCoy's memo talked about some invasive
Knotweed.
Again, that could be in the easement as well. To make sure so we get some comfort that those things are going to be taken care of. And to me, the more important, I guess you guys have a lot of experience removing invasives. Fine, you can do that. But the trees that go in, I've seen other places where the county or even probably even CA, we put in some smaller size trees. This is one that I think would help the community swallow what's happened to the extent they can, at least to see some nice sized trees out there.
So you want to make motion, amendment for that?
Well, I guess I want to ask staff, is that possible? Could we put that in the easement, or is that something that's
Yes, we could absolutely put that in the easement. I had a conversation with Howard County Parks and Rec. And it's, we have to look at not only the size of the trees, but where they're going in that utility easement area. And we could put some language in there that the landscaping has to be approved by CA prior to going in, and make some requirements about caliper. Generally, the smaller the trees are when they go in, the higher the survival rate. So we have to think about that as well. But it's also the species and where they're going in terms of that actual easement area. But I talked to Raul with the county. He's happy to do that. I'm confident that we can work with him together to create a good plan for that. And we also talked about the knotweed. He's fine with that, removing that as well.
well, I guess I don't know what to make my motion because I'm not a tree expert. So I mean, what I've seen before is like a 1-for-1 caliper diameter, like essentially if you replace it with like the diameter of the trees you remove, you replace that diameter with new trees, but then you've got to make sure you don't replace with so many trees, they're all small. So again, I don't know the right language, but do you have any suggested
So my language would be, you can't move forward with the, you can't final out the pathway until CA approves the landscape plan. And you have to come through us, and we have to approve the plan. So I don't know what the caliper would be today, or I don't know what that exact number would be or where they would be. I'd have to look long and hard at the plan and the work area. But the county has been flexible in terms of what they would put in. I understand your concern about losing trees and the size when they go in.
Okay, then I guess I move that the easement be, a condition be included in the easement that it will not go forward until CA approves the landscaping plan.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. So Greg made a motion to basically include the requirement that the landscape plan be approved by CA.
Point of order, Andy.
Yep.
Just a suggestion. Could we not do motion before we hear it? Because there might be a package of motions or a set of things that might be good ideas to do that we could put into a motion. But if we do a motion, then we have to talk about that, then we have to talk about something else and something else. How if we talk about the concerns and see if there's a motion that fits all the concerns?
Okay, so
Not necessarily one solution, but all the different pieces that would fit all the concerns.
So let me just say, because we reconsidered the vote, what we have is a motion which basically was made to approve the Patuxent Branch Trail and subject to review by the CA's watershed manager and coordinating with the county regarding safety issues. So that, because Ginny had made that. So that's the motion that's kind of on the floor right now. Okay, so to approve it, subject to the watershed and subject to the safety issues. Greg is adding one which says
Subject to CA approval of the landscape.
Right, so that would be that motion. Sorry.
I would like to add an amendment.
Can we vote on mine first?
Yeah, are you amending Greg's or?
No.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion on the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment to add the landscape requirement? Unanimous. Good. Okay, Shari.
I would also like to add something that was not included this time around, which was mentioned last time and has been up for discussion. It was the first time we heard it from the county. But I think because an easement is a contract, it needs to appear somewhere. And that is, I would like to add a split rail fence be built by the county along the river side of the parallel trail to assure the safety of runners, walkers, and bicycle riders.
The riverside.
The river side, not the inland side, but the side.
Not the street side.
Not the street side, but the river side, which is very narrow. County said that they were interested in putting in a split rail fence. I would like to have that included.
I second.
Okay. I'm getting this down, just a second. Any discussion on that?
Oh, I just have
Yes.
a question.
I'd like to offer an alternative to a split rail fence if there's something more aesthetically pleasing that is equal in preventative safety measures that go with something other than a split rail fence.
Okay, Ginny and then Al.
I think Janet kind of took care of mine.
I'll just go on record as saying I like split rail fences. So I'd like to hear, Sherry, you were the only one who voted not to reopen this issue. My understanding of that is that if we didn't give them the easement, that the current only other solution is that people have to walk on the road with cars and trucks and so on. So I'm curious as to why you preferred not reopening this. What are the rest of us missing?
You know, I think there are two problems here. As I continue to hear from people in King's Contrivance and the people who use the trail, what amazes me is that over the process of time, and this has been well over a year, not one person has said to me or emailed me or in any way contacted me and said, yeah, this is a great plan. We really love this plan. This is going to be beautiful and wonderful. Not one person. So that really, that gives me some pause. The other, conflict that I feel about this is that this is really an issue between the county and the developer. CA was, in effect, pushed out. We made an offer back in September of 2017 to the developer to come in from Guilford Road. And because the developer would have then come under the CA lien, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He's from Baltimore County, doesn't know anything about our county, has never paid a single penny in tax to Howard County. Didn't want to do it. So that basically took us out. So since then, we have been trying to work, the village has been trying to work with the county in some kind of way. The developer said he was going to widen the road from his portion of the property. That seemed to make some sense. So why wouldn't that have been a good way of separating out the two? I mean, there has been...
I have to say I don't understand why that would separate. That sounds like it would encroach further.
It would have widened the road and created a separate space for the walkers and the runners and the bikers.
So your claim is that the developer's already offered to do that?
He had in the past. So, the options that were available and that our village board actually asked for, the village board, after one of these meetings, asked that the county explore Plan B, which I've pointed out many times. Nothing happened. Nothing happened after that. We never got a meeting. We asked for a meeting with County Executive Kittleman. Nothing. Crickets. That never happened. So what I'm saying here is that there are options that still are out there that could be looked at. I'm very sympathetic to the situation, to the issue of safety. That's what got our board so concerned at the very beginning. But really, the responsibility rests with the county and the developer. And the precedent here is that CA is being asked to contribute, even though we have the same property rights as the developer, we're being asked to contribute for no money, no anything, as far as I can tell. Our pristine land that we're supposed to be preserving along the riverfront, so that a trail that already exists can be put in there. It just, It just really, really troubles me. That's all I can say. Really troubles me.
I agree, it should have been a county developer issue.
Okay, so let's go back to Shari's amendment. The question was over the split rail fence. Do you just want to put in a fence or an appropriate fence?
An appropriate fence. I'm willing.
All right. All right, so the amendment is an appropriate fence be put along the riverside of the path. Any discussion? All those in? Yeah.
Yeah, discussion. I think the issue is what we already have in the resolution, which is safety. And the safety means the whole path, both sides of the path, safe. People should be safe using the path. We already have that in there. I don't feel like I'm an expert where I know whether a fence is the answer or some type of landscaping is the answer or there's something else is the answer. I'm not an expert in that. I feel very comfortable with Dennis and Parks and Rec will work that out because I don't think they want to build a trail that's going to immediately have some accidents occur. So I have a level of confidence that we've covered that already by saying overall safety. So I think we just can get carried away with one requirement after another, and I'm not a tree expert, I'm not a fence expert. Maybe other people are. I doubt it.
Dick and then Greg.
I think a fence would be intrusive. We're already putting a pathway in there. We've got safety on the roadside with boulders and trees. I don't see a safety issue here. We don't really need a fence.
Great.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, I'm looking at the topographical map. It looks like there are 3 areas along this proposed path where you've got some steepness on the riverside of the path. But is it so steep that a fence would be required just to build it?
No. But David reminded me that the split rail fence is in the plan as it sits right now. It's already designed. It wouldn't be required, but it's already part of the plan.
On that side?
Yes. Now, if you wanted something better, the difficulty for me is I'm going to be going forward, and your vision of better, I would need more clarification.
Milton.
I just have a question. If it's not for safety, why would you put a fence in a natural area?
Right, and that's what I was going to ask is because I was going to also add it, not only why are you putting it, but to me, this is an area where kids might like to wander off and walk down to the river, right? So why should there be a barrier if it's not a safety issue?
Fall over the fence.
Point of
Sorry.
information.
Yep.
Okay. So I've been to this area, I don't know how many times.
Okay.
Remember that there is not, despite what it shows on the schematic, there is a drop to the river. That it is not wide, it is narrow. And the way the path is slanted down, when people on bikes, and particularly children on bikes, are coming down, they will accelerate. So the issue is that acceleration on a narrow strip, what you don't want is for some kid to wind up falling off the bike and falling into the river. It's just that simple. So having some sort of barrier there, if safety is going to be the concern and is the driving force for this whole thing, for this entire thing, then let's make sure we address the safety issue. There are big boulders in that river. When that river overflows, which it does periodically, there's lots of debris on the road. You hit a branch. If you're going to be concerned about it, just the way CA has put in fencing around the lakes, I think it makes some sense to put some fencing there to make sure that that doesn't happen.
All right, John.
So I went there. I do feel the slope is really steep. At the same time, I don't want the board to micromanage how they build the fence, build the road, and I just want to make sure if something happens on the trail, is that CA's liability? Somebody falling from the trail to the river?
I think Sherry went through that last time, and if it's something that is a design issue and the county designed the
So
pathway.
that will be the design
it's
issue,
their-
not a
it's
CS
their-
issue.
It's their problem.
Okay.
So the plan already includes a split rail fence.
It does.
Okay. Let's see. Dick,
Can I
anything
just
real
ask a
quick?
question? Now, if the plan already includes this, where is that plan? Have we seen that? Has that been presented to the board?
I thought it was reviewed.
I just saw the site plan. I didn't see anything that said anything about a fence.
I don't have the PowerPoint up, but I thought it was in the.
It's marked on the plan. It's a difficult plan to read though, Sherry, I will admit, because it's a 50 scale and it's hard to read. But there is a line between the path and the river, and it has an X across it, and that's the symbol for a fence. So it is on the site plan.
Okay. So let me call the vote on the amendment, which is the split rail fence, which is included in the plan, so it doesn't sound like.
I don't think there was a second, was there, for that?
Yes, there was.
I second.
Was,
Chow
okay.
seconded. Okay, so all those in favor of that amendment? Jerry, Nancy, Andy, Alan. Opposed. Oh, this is going to be tough now. Lynn, Greg, Dick, Ginny, Chow, Janet. All right. Motion failed 6-4. Okay, I'm going to call the question on.
I'd like to know the impact of that. Does that mean that the existing fence on the plan is going to be taken out?
No, what it means is that we're not requiring it as part of the easement. The plans already call for the fence.
Well, I'd just like to explain my vote in that I want to allow flexibility for the county and the and CA to determine if it literally a split rail is not workable and something else is that'll provide safety. That's really what I want. So I don't want to lock it into exactly a split rail is why I voted.
I think we said an appropriate fence is
Well,
what the
right now
amendment was.
it's split rail, so I that's why I voted no, just to explain it. So whatever you have to do to get safety, that was what my vote meant.
All right, let me call the question
Yeah.
on the overall motion where we amended with the landscape plan. All those in favor, which would approve the easement.
Wait, read that again?
So, approve the easement request from Howard County Associated Production Branch Trail, subject to the review of the CA Watershed Management in coordination with the county regarding safety issues and CA approval of the landscape plan. So that's what is in the motion now. All right, all those in favor. So Janet, Chow, Ginny, Lynn, Greg, Nancy, Dick, Andy. Opposed? Alan and Sherry. All right, thank you. All right. Then we get to move on to 3 easement requests from Howard County. Milton, anything you want to say about the 3 easement requests?
We, at the work session, we brought them to you. These easements are, number one, please separate these easements from the previous one. These easements are utility
Really?
easements. Yes.
You think so?
Yes. That's why they're on the agenda separately.
That's a good idea. Smart
These
move.
easements are for utilities, for sanitary sewer lines, for water lines, and so they're different.
All right. So, is
Move
there a
for
motion to
approval.
approve the
Move.
3 easements?
Move.
I second.
So Ginny moved and Chow seconded. Okay, discussion. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of the easements? Unanimous. Thank you.
I was in Nancy Ray's care.
I take unanimous votes. I mean,
Said unanimous before Nancy raised her.
no, I saw her raise her
Done
hand.
for now.
Okay, next up to the draft charges for the Climate Change and Sustainability Advisory Committee. Milton, anything you want to add?
Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Still no tie.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the proposed
So moved.
charges, which have included changes we made last time?
So moved.
So Ginny moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Chow seconded. All right, discussion.
My congratulations to the committee. You know, in a very short period of time, you've taken on a very large committee and a lot of issues. I'm very impressed with what you've done.
Yeah, we actually had our
Great job, you and the committee.
Yeah, the HCC had their campus sustainability day yesterday,
I was gonna
and
go, but I-
yeah, we actually had more than 30 representatives from different environmental organizations in the region attend that meeting. So we're already off to a pretty stellar start.
And you'll be sharing that with us at some point?
Yes.
Okay, Craig.
Yeah. Is there any concern about overlap with the watershed committee?
Yeah, there is absolutely concern that's addressed multiple ways. It's actually called out in our charter that we must coordinate with that committee as appropriate. And conveniently enough, one of the members of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee is Mr. John Klein, who is also a member of the Watershed Advisory Committee. So we already have cross-pollination with one individual there.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, I'll take the vote. All those in favor of approving the draft charges as changed? Unanimous. Good. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to board discussion. Gateway redevelopment.
Before we go on, Andy.
Yep.
And not about this issue, but I think it was in Jane's memo having to do with something about either the county thing or Symphony Woods. She referred to this as a work session.
That was an oversight.
Yeah.
Well, so my question is, should we hold this as our general policy as we're just hearing some information and there are no votes to be
Right,
taken?
right. We're just discussing, and this is just for discussion. We're not voting tonight.
What discussion? Be clear.
Right, we're not voting. I mean,
Thank you.
except to adjourn, of course.
Yes, we do.
Is Jane?
Please have a seat, Larry.
Thank you. I've got a little slide show if you want to kind of facilitate the discussion.
Valerie, could you
Valerie's like, not touch it.
Oh, hey.
Hi, Jane.
How are you?
So Jane, we're up to Gateway Redevelopment as an Innovation District.
Oh, thank you very much.
And if you remember to speak into the mic, because we've been having some.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Larry Tweel is here. I think
Welcome, Larry.
He is the executive director of the Howard County Economic Development Authority, and a pal of mine from Leadership Howard County. So we wanted to talk a little bit about innovation districts, and I can do that. And then Larry's going to talk about Gateway and what's going on there, and the county executive's ideas for the innovation district. So over many years around the country, we had office parks, which were the heart of our R&D. IBM had them. Every kind of company that was doing innovative work or research and development, universities were doing that, but it was mostly in suburban office parks. And more recently, innovation has been kind of flipped, and the idea of having universities or anchor institutions sharing information more freely with startups and having kind of working together. And so one-use office parks really don't lend themselves to that kind of environment. So these new environments of innovation districts are mostly occurring in urban areas, but not all. There are other places besides Howard County where we're trying it to bring innovation, startups in one place so that people are sharing information and also sharing new ideas and innovation. In the ones that are most well known, cities like Pittsburgh and Boston and really across the country and around the world, where we have an anchor institution. Usually it's a university, but it can be some kind of other institution like a hospital. So Gateway is now, and Larry will talk about this, is really trying to have that model here in Howard County. So as I understand it, it won't be all of Gateway right away, but to make it multi-uses and also to have the Innovation Center that just broke ground this week, right?
That's right.
To have resources in one place to try to stimulate innovation, tech transfer, all of those things. So in 2015, the Brookings Institute wrote a little piece on innovation districts. And at that time, there was some talk about innovation districts. And now, across the country, people are taking bits and pieces of what is the ideal innovation district and using it whatever best fits for them. So in Gateway, it's a much bigger area than usually is thought of for an innovation district. And also, we don't quite have the anchor institution that others have, but making up for that in other ways. So I think, Larry, if you want to talk just generally about the county executive's vision and kind of like,
So Jane, before we get that, there might be some questions.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I have a question. One, is innovation is this a zoning district?
no, it's an economic, I'm sorry, it is an economic development a tool, that's why Larry's here, and it is not anything to do with zoning. So on the ground, you don't even know what the zoning is of these other cities, and that really isn't an issue. It's really about having the uses in close proximity, being attractive to the new young workforce, having amenities in the space as well as other things, but it's nothing to do with zoning. Here it may require a change in zoning, but it is not a zoning district.
So one other question for you, and then I have the board come in. Are there any current innovation districts in Maryland?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
Burgeoning ones. University College, Maryland College Park has they call it their Discovery District. It's burgeoning.
Okay. So Ginny, Alan, Shari.
Yeah. Do any of these innovation districts also include residential?
Yes. So yes, that's common that it would be a
I didn't
mixed.
see anything here about that.
It'd be a mixed residential, retail, and the anchor institution and the new firms that are trying to essentially take their ideas and also have some more capital. And so that they can build on the anchor institution. But yes, residential, and also that the workspace often is different as well. Much of the open workspace that you've heard about, sometimes the physical part is what is preferred for these environments.
Alan, and then Shari.
So I don't know how to say this without sounding challenging, and this is a little bit challenging. It has nothing to do with whether we should or shouldn't have innovation districts. But in order for this half hour to be useful for us as a board here, in addition to just finding out what the executive's vision is and what innovation districts are, I'd appreciate it if this is pointed towards why should we care as CA board members, not just as interested county residents. We could hear that in an executive's presentation or your presentations.
You're very good. I'd be happy to start, and then maybe Larry when he speaks. So why you should care? Because it is being thought of in Gateway. And Gateway today doesn't have any of the characteristics that we want to have in the future for an innovation district. It has some, but there have to be substantial changes. So as I said, not every innovation district has to have the exact form that the ideal one has, but it's access to transit, residential, a mix of uses at least, having an anchor institution, did I say amenities? So many of these are not present in Gateway. So for that to occur here, many of those things are really land use changes, which then have to do with whether it's a plan or a zoning change, would have to occur. We're way early days for that. I know the county executive, I think, have talked about a 10-year horizon. The plan hasn't been done. The Department of Planning and Zoning hasn't yet looked at this area. That's why it's on your agenda to kind of. And okay.
I would add two other things. One, you're one of the major landholders inside of Gateway, and as Gateway could develop in this manner, your assessable base goes up, and that directly impacts your finances.
Sorry. And then I have Dick, Greg, and Bill.
Yeah, so are these innovation districts special tax districts?
Again, no.
No.
They are not.
Okay. And are they subsidized?
Maybe some are, but that is not. I don't think necessarily that what I've read that any of those that are subsidized. But maybe some are, but I haven't seen that. I've really seen it as an exchange of technology and ideas to have this. What do they call it when you have a university and a tech transfer? That's what it is. So having an anchor institution that's doing certain things and they want to bring them to market. They want to take that invention and use it in the marketplace. So I don't know of any underwriting.
The short answer is no. They're not subsidized. However, anchor institutions recognize the value of it and contribute to the development of it. But it's not a taxpayer subsidized formula. It's more of a developer anchor institution type of
I just
formula.
came from San Jose. And so, of course, you have, major tech finds other major tech, and there is a flow of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So is something built into this other than proximity of organizations to each other? Is there some sort of collaborative process that's built into this?
Absolutely. I mean, the community, the networking, the environment plays a huge role in that. And what makes Innovation District part of the recipe is, creating spaces for that kind of those kinds of interactions, whether it's an innovation center like what we're starting with, or in Boston, Kendall Square, they have the city actually built what's called District Hall, and it has a coffee shop in there, and it's just a series of conference rooms where those types of things occur, and that fuels the exchange of those ideas and is attractive to those kinds of companies.
So the city really did subsidize by creating a place for something to happen.
They built a building,
Uh-huh.
right? But it pays for itself through its finances. But I mean, that's a 13,000 square foot building in the midst of a multi-million square foot area of Boston. But it was on a city-owned parcel that was vacant. They wanted to do something useful that contributed to the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dick, and then Greg.
So we'd be taking office buildings and then adding, you said, some residential and some amenities. How does this fit into?
Dick, you have to speak up.
How does this fit into the Columbia Village system? Would this be a new village, or would this be something like another downtown? I'm not sure how it would be part of Columbia.
We might want to hold that question until after that, when the presentation starts about Gateway in particular. I mean, because have to address that.
No, I'm sorry, Andy, not going to let you sidestep it that quick. That was my point, too. This, to me, is absolutely inconsistent with the Columbia plan, right? We have a downtown, that's our urban center. We have our 9 villages with the village centers around there. This looks superficially attractive. We're going to see lots of pretty pictures and things, and they sound good. Technology, tech, who can be against that? But the fact is, this threatens to create a second downtown. This threatens, I think most of us, I assume all of us, want our downtown to succeed. We've been waiting for our downtown to succeed and be built for decades. And so to me, I just cannot fathom why we would want to create a second urban center 5 miles away from the urban center that we're trying to create and we want to succeed. To me, it just doesn't make sense. Fine, all the things they're talking there, but I'd like to have them in our downtown because that's where that's the Columbia downtown. It's not something on the side of Route 95. So, philosophically, I have a very big problem with how this is consistent with the Columbia plan, and I really do feel that this is a threat, a long-term threat to the success of our downtown and the villages. And again, while it sounds superficially attractive, I just don't see it. So.
Milton, and then let's Larry do the presentation.
Okay, well, I was just going to get back to one of Alan's question he posed. It's not so much we're concerned that most of the Gateway properties are within the boundaries of the Columbia Association, and they're subject to the annual charge. Actually, 1 and 2, our first and second largest annual charge payers are located in the Gateway.
Thank you.
All right, Larry, why don't?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll go through this, and maybe it'll answer some of the questions. And like Jane said, this is I'll call it an idea, a proposal. When you look at Howard County as I do as an economic development, where does economic development happen? Where do we attract companies? Where does employment need to be? We have the Route 1 corridor. Obviously, that's our heavy industrial area. We have Gateway, obviously. Downtown Columbia, obviously. Maple Lawn. And those are our anchor areas for large-scale employment density. Not exclusively, but those would be the top areas. The downtown plan is a great plan, and it absolutely needed to happen. But up until 2 years ago, it was still a plan. Steel just started coming out of the ground 2 to 3 years ago. Great plans like that take a long time to develop and execute on. And it's on its way. Now, it will take time for that plan to fully evolve. Absolutely. We're looking over the hill. At some point, downtown will be, done. Where does Howard County grow next? We can't grow west. Route 1 is practically full. Maple Lawn is almost done. There are other small areas, but where does Howard County grow next? And that's why we're looking at Columbia Gateway. When you look at it in that scale and the time it would take for a plan to evolve and develop and fully execute, we're going to be, we don't want to get caught behind the 8 ball saying, now that downtown's done, now what do we do? And then be 10 to 15 years away from doing something. So we start looking ahead. So that's what triggered our thought with Gateway. And I don't think my clicker is working. So the idea is, Gateway has been it was a planned industrial park, and if you look at it through its history, it was a gravel quarry. It was supposed to be. Oh, thank you. No, it was on. It was supposed to be an appliance park, and that was the original sort of plan as Columbia grew around it. It was supposed to have 10,000 employees, and as those plans changed, as General Electric changed their strategy. Rouse brought it back and turned it into the Gateway Office Park. And at that time, the traditional way you built office parks was a, building by building, surface parking type of neighborhood. And it's somewhat sterile. There's not a lot of amenities. If you don't know where to get a cup of coffee, you'll never find one. So we're hearing from the employers that are there, largely, tech companies, some manufacturers, but largely tech companies that are attracting the demographic that Howard County is, that it's hard to attract talent to their facilities in Gateway because it is, it's not, you have to drive to get there. You have to drive to go to lunch. It's just not as attractive as other places. And what we're concerned about is that trend will continue, and as other options become available, whether it's Port Covington or downtown Columbia or Washington, D.C., Gateway will become a ghost town. And if we aren't proactive about doing something, we've seen it happen. We can look at office parks around the region that are similar, that you can see through the buildings because they're empty. Some of the vacancy rates in Montgomery and Northern Virginia are over 20%. We're trying to be a little proactive and prevent that. So when you look at Gateway, the scale of Gateway, it is 920 acres, and a large part of it is either underutilized or undeveloped. And to give you a sense of 920 acres, if you're familiar with downtown Baltimore, go from Pratt Street and Howard over to President Street all the way up to like North Avenue. I mean, it's a large chunk of what a Baltimore city is. So there's a lot of land here that could be something someday. And, for the next 100 years, Gateway could be the answer for something. We're trying to be proactive about it in smaller chunks, in smaller bits. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of who owns the land, does Howard Hughes still own it, or do the individual property that's built?
There's a mix. Howard Hughes owns quite a bit. Copt owns quite a bit. Abrams Development owns quite a bit. You own a fair amount, and then there are a series of smaller users, but those would be the big four
Trying to figure
landowners.
out how difficult it'll be to bring all these people
Well, that's
together.
one of the challenges in a way, but it's a manageable challenge. It's not like downtown and there's one owner, largely, but there are 3 to 4, 4 to 5 major users. Unlike our challenges that we face along Route 1, where there are hundreds of users, and assemblage just becomes an issue. Yes, sir.
Yeah, as far as the size, I mean, I don't know why you compared it to Baltimore. I mean, this is largely the same size, if not a little bigger, than our downtown, right?
The downtown plan is about a third of that.
Right. So this is right. This is much larger than our downtown, right?
Mm-hmm. In land area, yeah. So we're not positioning Gateway to compete at all with downtown Columbia. This is in addition to, and for my clients and what they charge us with, we like to have a lot of options for a lot of different users. And downtown is a great fit for a great many types of businesses. Tenable is leaving Gateway and moving to downtown because downtown is a better choice for them. That trend may continue with other users as well. So
Pearson left the Gateway and moved to downtown.
yeah.
Great.
Downtown's a great. So
Can
It is great. I would like to see downtown succeed, and we're not competing with downtown. This isn't us versus them or this versus that. This is in addition to. Yes,
But
ma'am.
this seems to indicate to me that there is a competition. The downtown today is winning that competition. But because this is 3 times the size and will conceivably have many more amenities and will have brand new residents and so on, it will definitely be in competition with downtown. I don't know how it couldn't be.
Milton?
Well, I wanted to be a part of the conversation, but everyone knows that I'm on the EDA board, okay? And so I've been part of these discussions. But the thing about it, as Larry said in the discussions we've had, is that it's not so much what's happening now. Downtown, as all of you know who've been here for a long time, it was a 10-year effort to get to the 2010 when the county council finally approved the plan, and the horizon for the downtown plan has 30 years. And now the market may drive it and it may happen faster. What the EDA is trying to do is that right now we have this property, this large area, and we need to start planning in advance of the tenants moving. Everyone, I think most individuals in here have heard of the Research Triangle in North Carolina, one of the well-known suburban office parks. That's looking at, a portion of that is looking at an innovation district. Because everyone is saying that the suburban office park is dead. And so what the EDA is trying to do is that not wait until all the tenants are gone. It's planning in advance. It's like what happened with the downtown to what's the next iteration of the Gateway area.
I understand that, and I don't mean to interrupt your whole
That's
thing,
okay.
but I agree with what Dick and Greg said. The big concern is how does this tie into Columbia and what Columbia is all about? And I think that's the concern of the majority of us on the board. I mean, it's a lovely idea. We do have to plan for the future. I agree with that. But my concern is how is it tied in to Columbia and the villages?
Yeah, I'm not critical of the idea, but these ideas, once they get moving, have a tendency to build momentum, and all of a sudden you end up with a result that you haven't planned for or haven't taken fully into consideration. And so how this would become part of Columbia is a major concern. We want to make sure that this fits in to what Columbia is and what Columbia is going to be. And I think these are things that have to be thought about as we are in these very early stages. How does this fit in to what we've got here?
I'm not clear on the concern because it is in Columbia.
It is part of Columbia.
It is
How
part of
does
Columbia.
it become an operating part of Columbia? Right now, it's a bunch of offices off in the distance that really doesn't have a member on the board, that isn't really part of what we consider Columbia to be, which is a downtown with 9 villages. And so does this become another village, or does this become some different kind of an entity? How does it integrate into the plan? The plan, the vision, the Rouse vision. How does this part of it?
Ginny and Lynn.
Yeah, I guess what I've been hearing for a while is this is almost turning into, maybe not as bad right now, as what's happening, for example, in Oakland Mills Village Center. If you don't change, you wind up with losing businesses. So you're losing some to downtown or other places. So it's just a matter of when you have somewhat of a ghost town. So I understand why you're planning. The other thing in terms of residential development there, you're not going to be building single-family detached homes at the cost of housing there. So I see it as an opportunity where you get more people working there, that they will be looking for houses in our villages as well as elsewhere. But that's an opportunity for them to move into our communities and live there.
That's right.
And contribute to
That's
the
right.
community.
And I put the 920 acres up there to show you what comprises Gateway. I don't want to lead you to believe that we plan on developing 920 acres, in a single fell swoop. I'm sorry if I might have led you to that
Lynn?
conclusion.
Yeah, I think we really do need to look at these kinds of proposals where, there's so many tipping points going forward right now. When we've seen it in the strip malls that are totally, desolate right now. We are very lucky with our mall right now, but we could also have been very unlucky with it. I think we really need to look at other options. Just the whole idea of an innovation zone sounds forward-thinking. So I'd really like to hear more about what would be involved in it and, then talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Larry?
Okay. And I kind of built this before Jane's comments, but she touched on a lot of this. And why do we see Gateway as an opportunity? It has those elements that Jane talked about. There's a concentration of key industries, relatively few owners. There are parcels available for new development, but also redevelopment. A great regional location. There is institutional support, not as staunch as other innovation districts, but we are in the middle of this region with the federal labs and the educational institutions that could play a role. So those are the key ingredients that we see helping fuel something like this. I'll skip over this because Jane really hit it, and the research from the Brookings Institution that talks about why this is becoming a trend. And when you look at the assets that innovation districts comprise, they have economic assets, business networking assets, and the physical assets, both public and private. Those are the intersection of all of that is the fuel for the innovation district. And we look at Gateway's foundational users, and we just started to map who's in there already. And Tenable is for the next 2 years. Merkle, Leidos, UMBC, University Space Research Association, Johns Hopkins, the Community College, Maxim Healthcare, Magellan is University of Maryland Health Systems, and ourselves with our Innovation Center. There is, you have a lot of good ingredients here already. So we're not talking about building from the ground up. There is a great ecosystem there already that will help fuel this type of development, as well as TEDCO, Kaiser Permanente, Laureate. And just to kind of reiterate, what are some of the economic assets? You have, a cluster of technology firms. You have government institutions there. You have educational institutions there. There is an opportunity for transit, there's no doubt, and amenities. That's what we want to focus on. And some of the physical assets, just in terms of, trails, parks, biking, and the connectivity of all that. And the networking assets, obviously, in that kind of neighborhood, and the tech council that we run, as well as the other organizations that are there in terms of the business networking, it is a huge opportunity. So, short term, how are we beginning this process? We're starting to bring the community together, working with the businesses that are there, the property owners that are there. Right now, largely companies, it's like living in a cul-de-sac. You pull into your office building, you go upstairs, and then you pull out at night, and you really don't know who lives next door to you. We're trying to connect that neighborhood, those companies that are there that I just showed you. That's the fuel that starts to drive the ideas and the creativity and the collaboration. And you see the building there where our innovation center will launch next spring with our incubator and the other strategic partners we're bringing into that center. Mid to long term, this is, could it be more dense? Absolutely. That's to be decided. I'm not telling you that we're going to have 920 acres of, 6,000 residents and 17 million square feet of building. That's way, way too early to even start contemplating what it might be. But when you want to talk about how is Howard County going to grow in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, there's opportunity here. Of those 920 acres, 216 of it is surface parking. There's 156 acres of building footprint. There is a lot of room for improvement here in terms of better use of space. It's hard to, there's a lot of single-story buildings that were built back when land was cheap and space was available. Is that the highest and best use for an office park or a county when you're running out of space? Maybe not. When you look at the age of some of the buildings, there are a lot of buildings there. There's probably over 1 million square feet of building there that is, from the 1970s, 80s era. So there's some ripe opportunities for redevelopment. There are some newer buildings that are perfectly fine, but there are some great opportunities for redevelopment and rethinking how that gets used. The property owners commissioned a planner who has done innovation districts from across the country just to brainstorm about what could possibly be done in Gateway. And you'll see a couple of, maybe it's an improved transportation network with more of a grid type of system. Maybe it's a better use of buildings. Maybe it's a better use of open space. Maybe it's a way of connecting the various neighborhoods that are there. It basically was done to begin a discussion. This isn't a plan. This is an idea of a plan. And the developer or the planner said himself, he said, you certainly would not, try and bite off 920 acres and turn it into an innovation district. You would strategically find smaller areas of, 100 acres, 80 acres, and do some smarter use and redevelopment. And if you, did allow higher building heights, what could the densities be? Please don't get scared by this chart. This is an idea for, this, you could fit more buildings, more parking, more retail. You could fit a hotel. It was meant to spur discussion and debate about when it is time to plan Gateway. You might want to think about bite-sized pieces that have, different uses and different types of, zoning, call it. Some of the things you might want to think about including, libraries, coffee. I mentioned District Hall, one of those types of facilities where it's a public use space. Fitness centers among the other types of amenities that this drives what is attractive to talent. Talent drives the attraction of companies, and it is fuel for the discussion. Now, timing on this, the discussions will really probably begin late next year, because this is going to take consideration of your new town zoning. This is going to take consideration of what does a plan start to look like. None of that can happen until after the county's code rewrite is finished and new town zoning is contemplated. And it would be a process that looked much like the way the downtown Columbia plan was envisioned. So this isn't a we're starting to push dirt next year on a whole new set of development. This is the discussion about being proactive about an idea for an asset of the county that can be put to a higher and better use. And we should start now, because it takes a while to implement. And we would be lucky if it resembles what the downtown plan eventually evolved into. I'm not going to speculate on it's going to have residential, it's going to have amenities. It's way too early. I mean, those are some of the elements that make these kinds of places attractive, but it is really very early in the idea phase of how do we properly plan for future prosperity for Howard County in the future.
As you said, we are just beginning the conversation here, and I'm not opposed to doing something to get better value out of this big piece of property. But you can't look at it in a vacuum. You can't look at it and you seem to be looking at it as a standalone proposition. You kind of sort of bring Snowden Square into the picture, but not very much. You're just looking at these 900 acres. And as the discussion continues, and as we see what the possibilities are, you have to look at the synergies of being part of Columbia. This is not, some tumor off on the side. This has to be part of Columbia, and it has to be integrated into Columbia. So I would give a lot of thought as you discuss this in the future to how are you going to be a part of Columbia? How are you going to be a good neighbor? How are you going to be a community? Are you going to be a village? What exactly is your relationship going to be with Columbia?
I agree.
Well, Dick, the point that also is that the Gateway is already a part of Columbia. It's part of the 14,200 plus acres that Mr. Rouse bought.
That's my point.
That's not talking physically.
No, that is my point. It is in our boundaries.
Right.
If we are getting money off of it, we could make a lot more money off of it. But is it really, psychologically part of Columbia? Is it like, just like our villages are part of Columbia, just like downtown is part of Columbia? This is off in the woods someplace, 5 miles away. How do we make it part of us?
It's called planning.
That's what I'm saying.
It's just like any other place where you have a use that was put in place 50 years ago. That use is no longer really relevant or viable. So you reposition the use and you replan.
No argument there. What my concern is this just something separate, or is it part of Columbia?
It's part of Columbia.
Good.
Okay, let's go Janet and then Chow.
So along those lines, Dick, I actually see this as something that could be very synergistic if there's efficient transit that connects town center, the spots along the way, and Gateway, because there's kind of two bookends, and there could be a lot of synergy, I think, there. And I work in Gateway, so I can attest to no amenities. So it's very difficult to get lunch. But there are also a ton of tech companies that you see all over the place, and I think it is an opportunity. I agree with you that it needs to make sense and that planning is very, very important, but I see a lot of opportunity with being able to connect it to town center and sort of create that end-to-end that could serve both of those.
Joe?
I think my question, Larry, thanks for coming to talk.
Thanks for having me.
I got a similar question. You said that there's a transit, the plan for transient, some way is a train or something else?
I can't say what the transit would be, but
any thought on that?
well, like Janet would say, I mean, this has to work. You just can't, say we're going to build this and expect it to be filled with cars. It's got to be connected. It's got to be part of a more coordinated transportation plan. I would like to see, I would like to see that sooner rather than later, but that's got to be part of the integrated plan. I mean, this isn't just a land use, plan. This has got to be a transportation plan as well.
Because I see there are like two issues. One issue is that kind of seems primarily for people in Howard County, right? Then how do we connect that section to other part of Howard?
Absolutely.
Then the other part is for people like in Baltimore or DC, they want to work here. How do we connect them with this facility, right? And I just feel so important because recently I traveled to DC 3 days a week and one way 2 hours. So I just it's a pain. And how can we improve our traffic or transportation?
One of the things we've asked, we will be asking to look at is, Gateway as an old industrial site. There's an old industrial rail line that runs directly, along the western edge there. Is that an opportunity for a dedicated transit option of some sort? Possibly, but we want to look at those kinds of creative things that maybe would connect to a MARC station that then now you're directly hooked into the DC Baltimore markets. So I mean, it's going to take some creativity, no doubt, but it's got to be part of a connected transportation plan.
Thank you.
Jenny?
Yeah, the rail line that you're talking about has been talked about for a long time, and whatever you do there, if you don't preserve that, you've lost that option. The other thing is, although some of your county people that are in charge of transportation don't seem to agree with this, but Bridge Columbia has suggested that you have somewhat of a circulator bus and look at Bridge Columbia and turn it into also allow a circulator bus to go from downtown all the way using some roads and path system and go actually to Gateway and back. So you would connect the two. That's been in discussion for a long time.
Shari and then Lynn?
Yeah, I think there are some very exciting possibilities because of the kinds of spaces that are available there. One of the things that I've seen in other communities is the repurposing of buildings. So not necessarily the building up. I used to live in Ithaca, New York, and one of the great places to live was a repurposed schoolhouse. 2 floors, classrooms made into small apartments, great for millennials as long as you keep the prices down, and that's one thing we don't have. So maybe this becomes a village that is oriented towards young people who are working in tech who can't afford to live here now. So how do we integrate some of those ideas? We even talked about tiny houses in little mini villages on some of the open space. I mean, if you were really going to talk about innovation, there are some exciting possibilities here. Not just plunking down more houses and building them higher, but building for a new century. We don't necessarily need buses on grids if we have small electric vehicles that can pick up 8 or 12 people and take them from one place to another with a dedicated system, just like a point-to-point system. There's great stuff going on now in the tech area. So, this is the kind of forward thinking I really hope that we're going to do, not just about the land, but looking at the whole.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the creativity that something like this would allow is unique. unique. I agree with you.
Lynn?
No,
Lynn?
I think there sound like a lot of exciting possibilities, certainly. Endless. What, it took us 18 years to get where we are now with downtown. You know, if you're just starting this concept,
Right.
you know, we're looking at 2050, 2040. You know, we're looking way ahead. But I think it's really exciting, and what a great time to be talking about it as we're looking at our zoning regulations again. So.
Thank you, and I appreciate you, being invited to come in and just kind of brief you on it, because it's out there as a, an initiative, but we're not even started yet. We're ideating, and the county executive is forward thinking and has charged us to think likewise. And I think we were invited here tonight to kind of give you an early glimpse of some of the thinking and the why behind it all. The process begins quite some time from now when all of those other things have to be in line first, such as the zoning code and Newtown zoning and the master plan. So I appreciate the opportunity to just kind of give you a sort of a preview of some of the thinking that's why are we even thinking this way about it. So thank you.
So I'm going to jump in for. So I just like to follow up, I think, a little bit on what Dick said in terms of Columbia, and you've kind of heard it mentioned a little bit. In my view, I mean, if you look, when we talk about people, when we talk about residences, it's either a village or a neighborhood. Those are the things that form Columbia, and so the question here is when you add the residential component, as you're talking about, well, the only models we have in Columbia are village or neighborhood. And so the question that we have been kind of in is, are you looking to use the village as the model? Or are you looking at this as kind of like a neighborhood? So we know kind of what villages look like in Columbia. I mean, generally, a variety of housing styles, a village center, something. And we kind of know what neighborhoods, a much smaller area. Well, and so when I happen to see residential, that's kind of the first question that pops in my mind. Are we kind of looking at this as just a new village, let's say an 11th village in Columbia? Not putting that. Or is this just a neighborhood of, say, Longreach or Owen Brown or, one of the villages around it? So, and then things look a little differently. The amenities, the type of things that go with that. And when you start thinking about that kind of is how it integrates into the Columbia plan. So just, and let Greg have the last.
No, I don't have to be the last word, but I think everybody knows how I feel. The one thing I really have to push back on, if you're going to propose a plan with office, residential, retail, hotel, and amenities, and something called a Main Street, and something this size, you are proposing to build a second downtown in Columbia. You just are. And you can't just like, some Jedi mind trick say, this is not a second downtown. This will not compete with your downtown. These are not the droids you're looking for. I mean, you can't do that. You got to maintain some kind of credibility. Call it what it is. It's a second downtown. And if the Columbia plan means anything, and obviously people know me, I think it does, this is absolutely inconsistent with the Columbia plan. And I know why landowners want to do it, right? They're trying to maximize their value. And I must say, I agree with Janet and others who say, gee, I can't go to a coffee shop or there's no amenities. Fine, solve the amenity problem, solve the coffee shop problem. But you can solve that problem without doing so much harm to the Columbia plan. I know it sounds quaint to people who aren't, Columbia people. Oh, why do they care about this old thing that was put up in the 1960s? But Columbia works. We like the way it works. I want the downtown to work. We all want the downtown to work. And again, to me, it's not enough to say, well, we're just thinking of this a think piece, or something like that. No, this is something that could very well happen within the time that our downtown is still being built. And the last thing you want to do when your downtown is built and it is succeeding is to then do something like this that's going to compete with that downtown. I am so I just feel like Columbia's waited so long to have a successful downtown. All these companies, all these things that you're talking about belong downtown. If there are some problems out there you need to fix with making it more attractive for industrial people to come out there, fine. But again, I just have a philosophical problem with this that obviously you can tell that I don't, I just don't see this as a valuable thing for Columbia at all.
So why was Gateway chosen over downtown for this?
95.
Space.
I'm,
I-95.
what do you mean chosen over downtown?
Why didn't you come to us and say, we have this wonderful idea for an innovation district in downtown Columbia?
The downtown plan was pretty well baked by the time
In what way would
we
it
got
be
here.
incompatible, though, with an innovation district?
I'm sorry?
In what way would it be incompatible?
Downtown might have been a great idea for this. I mean, there's no reason to say downtown couldn't be, but the downtown plan is set. It's on its way. There will be plenty of innovation in downtown. Make no mistake about it. But as the downtown plan is as attractive as it is, if we do nothing with Gateway, it will look like Tatooine. I will tell you, vacancy will be. We will have vacancy in the 20 to 30% range. It will be, unfortunately, because that is the market.
That's where we move Fairway Hills.
And it will. Gateway. Downtown is an excellent plan, and Gateway could learn a lot of lessons from that. And I think the thoughts about how does it look residentially, and is it those are all good planning models that should go into the thinking when that process actually does begin.
All right, Challen, you haven't talked yet, so
Okay.
go, and then we're going to wrap up and go.
So
to the
Larry,
next.
if we build something here, how do we kind of make sure Gateway and Columbia will be a friendly competition instead of
I wouldn't even call it a competition. I'd call it a good. There are good choices in Howard County. If you want downtown and lakefront and the mall and all of the lifestyle things that comprise downtown, it's a great choice. Gateway is another option, and Howard Hughes is one of the major landholders. They have a vested interest in making sure that downtown works and Gateway works. So I think it's very symbiotic. Frankly, I think it was described as maybe bookends. We should position Howard County as there are lots of great choices there. This isn't a one versus the other inside of our own walls. We're competing with Austin and Denver and Silicon Valley and Northern Virginia, and we should have lots of good options. And this is helping us, stand up to that kind of competition, not amongst ourselves versus, downtown versus Gateway.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks, Jane. Is it possible we could get a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, I can give it to you if you promise to use it for good and not evil. All the numbers in there are just speculation. I swear, when you see 7,000 cars, it's just it's just a planner.
Draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, we're going to move on. So next up, we had a little change in the agenda. We're going to do the communication process for board queries. So, Milton, anything you want to?
No, Laura's going to be doing
Welcome, Laura. You have to speak into the mic. Sorry. The mic moves, so.
go.
Okay, now I think it's on. Okay, great. So I am here today just to share a new communication process that has been implemented over the last 6 weeks or so. And this is in regards to the different queries and questions and comments that come in via the Columbia Association website to all of you, the Board of Directors. So just to ground everyone, again, there's a page on our Columbia Association website. If you go to the Board of Directors page, right at the very top, there's an arrow in red there that indicates if you have a comment or a question, you may reach, the entire Board of Directors via this link, and it's hyperlinked. And when you click on the hyperlink, it fills out a form where someone can fill in their information and share their question or concern, and that email goes to all of you. So there's different types of questions or queries that come in. If you can recall seeing some of them in October, they've spanned a number of different types, so to speak. Some of the folks are expressing opinions. Some want to report a concern or problem. Many are asking questions, and then some are complaints. Their voices want to be heard, and there's different types of responses that we've been providing. We absolutely acknowledge receipt of the email, and then we may either be thanking them for the information, we may be providing an answer as needed, providing some type of response. And I've provided just some different types of examples, but I'm sure as you're all getting these emails, you're quite familiar with the types of questions and queries that come in. Just to give you a sense of the volume of questions that come in via the website, in April we saw an unusually high number, and I think this was around this neighborhood center topic that generated a number of questions and concerns. But if you look at the following months, I would say we normally average about 11 or 12 questions that come in via that website link. So as I was looking at the process that was in existence earlier today, it seemed that there were a number, not earlier today, earlier in the year, there were a number of missing elements to that process, this communication process I would refer to. I think first and foremost, this regular feedback loop to the board was missing. I think sometimes you got responses in terms of how some of CA was responding to these questions and concerns. I don't know that there was always a very accurate tracking report that was being done. I believe another missing element was this coordination between the board and staff and making sure that we were communicating. And there was also, I believe, a lack of a goal or timeline in terms of how quickly we would turn around and respond to one of these questions that comes into the board. So this next flow chart really lays out the new process that we've been implementing, as I said, over the last 6 weeks or so. And just to take you through what you see visually here, we have the consumer or the resident or the member labeled at the top. The board of directors is the next row. Maria O'Donnell is our assistant director of our customer member service center. She's the one that has been forwarding most of her responses to you to share, what the responses have been. There's myself as the CMO, and then we've labeled subject matter expert at the bottom. So if we read from kind of left to right, a submission comes in through the website. That submission goes, you get a copy of it, Maria gets a copy of it, and I get a copy of it, so that we're all seeing the type of question that's coming in. Maria will acknowledge and say, yes, we've received this response and received your question, and we're checking into it as appropriate. And then depending on the type of query that's coming in, she may choose to reach out to a subject matter expert. And when I refer to a SME in this case, if I can use an acronym, she's referring to, she may be reaching out to Dan, the director of sports and fitness. She may be reaching out to Dennis if it's a question related to open space and say, here's what's come in, how should we respond to this? Is this something that falls within CA level responsibilities? Is it something that falls within county? How should we respond to this resident or concern? She will then follow up when she has that response to the consumer or resident. And then what she's been doing is she's been sending that email to the board of directors and copying me to let you know we have addressed this and this was our response to the question that came in. The last thing she does is that she records that in a tracking sheet. So we have a Google Excel tracking document, and it has labeled all the different months and all the different types of questions that have come in and what our response has been back to that resident or consumer. So the one thing I think that's not on here that I am proposing is Maria has been submitting those responses to you one by one individually in email. I think the number of queries and questions for October has been a little above average. And I think, Ginny, one thing you may have pointed out is that it becomes a bit difficult when you have all these separate emails coming in with questions and then her separate responses, and you're trying to match up, okay, which got answered and what was this in response to? So what we'd like to do moving forward that I think will be even easier for everyone to keep track of is to share that tracking document with you. It clearly outlines, we keep track of every single thing that comes in. You can look at it month by month and look at all the different types of issues and what we copy our exact response has been in each individual row. So we have that prepared. We've been using it as a tracking document. I think that may be easier to send you all a link that you can go in anytime, since it's a Google Live doc, and see what those responses have been.
Thank you. Okay. I'm a little concerned with it being a pull rather than a push.
Can you explain more your concern?
Pull means I have to go out, click on it, go find it. Push means you send it my way.
If you prefer, we can send a weekly update. We can choose one day where we always send the latest, the document that's live, whether there's any new inquiries that have come in or not. Or we could do it once every 2 weeks.
That'd be my preference.
Okay.
Janet?
I was just curious, when we have access to that document, will we have the ability to, like...
Janet.
Oh my gosh, this thing's annoying. Really?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I'm just too.
Well, if you just sit up like that.
It's not comfortable because I have a chair leg here or a table leg.
Sorry. So when we get access to the spreadsheet, will we have the ability to search it, and will there be filters already applied, or? And I'm only asking because I use a lot of Google Sheets at work, and people go in and they do their own queries, and they sort of mess up the sheet, and it's nice to be able to have that opportunity. So if we're going to have that, then we might want to have a 10-minute session on how to create your personal filter so that you're not...
changing it every single time. Oh, good point. Well, what we could do is, as I think through this, we could keep the Google Live doc with Maria or myself, and she'll go in and do the updates, and then take and convert it to an Excel document and send that out to everyone instead of the Google Doc, perhaps.
Yeah,
that way you
I don't
can
wanna
sort and
create
filter.
extra work for anyone. I know that sometimes it can get...
Once you change it, it gets changed if someone's not saving it as a different file type. Good point.
Chow?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I think that's definitely lay out how we got feedback, then we can understand what the reply from the staff, and then at least when next time we got a question, we can answer them directly. We don't need to refer to you guys. I think I have a concern with a Google Doc, because on my cell phone I have 5 accounts. The default account is not a CS account. Then each time I open it, it's asking me for password. Because we change password so frequently, I just couldn't remember the password. I hope you share the PDF file or something instead of like a Google document. Just a concern for me.
It doesn't have to be password protected.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I'm sure, convert this into a PDF document or an Excel document. I mean, the PDF you wouldn't be able to sort and filter. I think the Excel document would give you greater ability to do that if you need to do that.
Greg?
Yeah. This is fine. There's a spectrum of comments, right? You categorize them pretty well. There's some that I don't think merit a response at all, right? So once in a while we get one of these sales pitch things, use our lawnmower service or whatever. mean, I think we'd agree we don't need a response to those, right?
Right.
Okay. That's number one. Number two, the complication that I've seen from certain board members, all well-meaning, is that board members jump in and make a comment before you guys comment. And is it fair to assume that your preference is that we not do that?
I think our preference is that if you have a strong comment or opinion after receiving the query, that you reach out to Maria or myself, and if there's going to be internal discussion around what that response to the consumer be, we take that offline rather than the consumer resident getting multiple different opinions from different people. We'd rather there be one point of view or one type of response that goes back.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I just maybe wanted that to be clear, because that does, it's got to just complicate your job if 9 board members were to respond with the resident there. Well, I agree, or yeah, this really is horrible, Amy, or whatever, and then your guys are like, gosh, what are we supposed to respond? So I don't know. I just think that ought to be maybe the clear to everybody.
Alan and Milton.
Yeah, it may come as no surprise that
I know you've been.
These are emails to the board, not emails to the staff, and the board is composed of a bunch of different people. And I have absolutely, I not only have no problem with each of us if we have different thoughts about something, not speaking for the board, not speaking for the organization, but speaking for ourselves, responding. That the whole point for me of something like this is so that we are more accessible to residents, not that residents. If it's supposed to be messages to the staff, then let's call it messages to the staff, and staff can let us know what they decide.
No.
Well, 2 points. The first one is that that same site allows individuals to contact individual board members. That person or making an query does not have to send it something to all 10. Well, I receive them also, so it goes to all board members. And Alan, yes, I know that sometimes you respond, and Alan can respond with his personal opinion, whatever, but I just hope that you emphasize your personal opinion, because if you can't respond, you should not be responding on behalf of the association.
Agree 100%.
Great.
I know I already spoke, but I feel like this is different. Yes, Alan, it's to the board, but really it's to the organization, right? It's to the leadership. And I think when a resident communicates and puts that, communicate to the board, that resident really doesn't want 9 different views from 9 different members. It wants a response from the organization. And I mean, maybe there's a compromise in your ground where if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with that resident, which obviously is well within your rights to have, you could have that one-on-one conversation outside of this process, which again, to me, is a resident asking for a response from the organization. I mean, would that work?
That's not what I hear them asking for. I hear them communicating with the board, and the organization can't have a response. The board can't have a response as a board until the board votes on something. So if this is indeed, again, communication with the board, then it's individual residents say things. We as individual board members, absolutely not speaking for the board or for the organization as a whole, respond. And if then it rises to the level of a board action, then somebody can speak, whether it's chair for the board or president for the board or a particular appropriate staff member for the organization, can answer. But I don't.
Don't you see what that's doing, though, to
our
marketing people trying to craft a response from the organization, and then you or someone is throwing in things from left field that's potentially complicating that.
I don't see it from left field. I see it from center field, and I don't think that this. I'd have to look back at all the different things that people have put in. Most of them, of course, I don't respond to. Almost all of them I don't respond to.
Unless it's a neighborhood center, and then you respond to every one.
If it's a neighborhood, well, at that point, that was a particular thing where people started weighing in, and I figured if I was going to respond to one, I better be equitable and respond to all. But if you think of the whole, if you think of neighborhood centers as a topic, I think of all the different topics over the last however long we've been doing this, I've responded to very few. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't respond to most. There are maybe some, I'd have to look at the list to see if there are some that I really thought were just truly, I mean, certainly the ones that are, can I be your mowing service? That's organizational, I could care less. But most of the time, it's residents trying to communicate with their board. And that to me is not asking for, I see an organizational response, in fact, coming from, if not left field, sort of saying, let's have the organization step here in the middle of the process between residents and their board. So we have very different views of what the purpose of this communication is.
So I just want to step in and say, because I agree with Greg in the sense that the difficulty I always find when board members respond is then the poor resident doesn't have a clue.
Right.
They just assume that that's the board's response. I mean, because they mailed it to the board.
What's your data to support that conclusion?
It's commonsensical, Alan.
Yeah. So if you send the question into the board and somebody responds, you assume that that's the board response. So that's one of the things I think is a difficulty. Janet?
I actually don't agree with you. I mean, I choose not to respond, but in general, when people respond, it's not an answer. It's I understand how you're feeling kind of thing. And I think when a lot of residents reach out, all they want to know is that someone's listening. And so even, a quick, we hear what you're saying, and then followed up by a more thorough answer. I mean, I think that provides residents with some feedback immediately. I don't really see it as detrimental. I haven't seen any answers come from board members that would imply that that's the final answer. I mean, if I were a resident, I would think like, okay, that's someone agreeing with me, and now let's see what the actual answer to my question is.
My only comment is that if individual board members want to decide to respond, that's your prerogative. But I only will emphasize, please understand that if you respond, I think it's better to just address them as a board member as opposed to responding on behalf of the organization. Because if we find that you have responded and it's incorrect information, we're going to have to correct you.
Absolutely.
How would you know?
Ginny?
Because we see the response.
How would you see the response?
Because generally when they respond,
Well, we don't know I always respond to all, but there may be board members who respond individually to the resident.
To all.
Jenny?
Just two quick things. When you get a chance, when you look for the board of directors, the first thing that comes up, at least the way I use the website, is this complaint concern form. So that's what you really see, and you fill that out, and it goes to the whole board. Okay. But if you want to find the individual board members, it is not user-friendly in any way, shape, or form to find out who's your rep for your village. It's difficult to find it. So if you could look at that, make it more user-friendly, maybe it's just me, but you got to go through a couple of steps, and that makes no sense. The second thing is when people fill out that form, I don't know how you guys feel about maybe having them put in as an option even their village or their neighborhood, so you have a sense where these concerns are coming from. Maybe you don't think that's important, but...
Ciao.
I think I have no problem the board member reply. So I have a concern if our staff is not responding. That's my concern. I think in the past we got situations we need to remind our staff to reply to our residents' concern. That's sometimes I got a concern. As I said, I always compare our system with the school system. Whenever I send an email to the school system, I got a reply within 1 day. So that's the timeline I'm looking forward.
We generally are trying to reply within 3 business days. If we can earlier, we absolutely do, but there are some situations that if you need to research.
So you can say, I received your email, we're looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
Do that right
Yes.
away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? They do that. You do that right away.
Yes.
Yes, but it's new, right? So I appreciate that. But in the past, we're not doing that.
Right,
So
but now they do.
Yeah,
They,
I
they,
appreciate that.
they acknowledge every question.
Yes.
Dick's next, you know.
I like the system that's evolving right now. It's nice seeing how Maria answers those letters, and I think it's a big improvement over where we were before. We never knew whether anything was being answered or not.
Right.
I like the idea of identifying the village, because if it's my village that somebody is writing from, I'll make a personal note. One of the things that bothers me about Alan is when he responds, then I say, oh boy, now they think Alan's the only guy on the board who cares about anything. So I think you got some good suggestions now, and I certainly appreciate the fact that we have a better idea of what we're telling people.
Okay.
Yeah, this is certainly a great improvement.
Yes.
Over,
Yeah, thank you.
you know, so looks good.
Great. Thank you.
Alan?
I just wanted to say that I forgot to say that part of it, that I really like the regularity with which I see people being responded to.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up, Howard County Phase 2 Land Development Regulations. Milton, anything?
No. I thought this is you.
Yeah. Welcome, James. The topic really for tonight is the open space, because we've been mentioning that for a while. So Jane is going to provide us with some background.
So I want to begin, and I wanted you to look at the definition with me of open space. And this is in the ordinance in Newtown regulations, and defines open space within the Newtown. And so, I can take this with me. So it says, all lands devoted to raising crops, agricultural uses. Obviously, this is written in 1965. Parks, playing fields, golf courses, and any other outdoor recreational uses, as well as lands covered by lakes, rivers, streams, and all lands devoted to public or community uses. So public or community uses include the schools, libraries, and things like that. The parcel has to be larger than 2 acres in size, and it particularly does not allow parking lots in streets and right-of-way, except for a few exceptions. So it's really environmentally sensitive land, water bodies, and then lands that public facilities can go on. So we know that many of our Howard County schools in Columbia are on open space. And when we talk about these lands that pass this test, that is what we mean by credited. You've heard that term probably, credited open space, and non-credited. So there's no such thing as non-credited in the ordinance. It's it's a regulation that says this is what open space is. So anytime an FDP has been approved and had open space designated, that goes to the credited. That means it's credited. And it's credited towards the 36% of the land that's zoned Newtown that has to be open space. Any questions on that? Yes?
When you have a school, does the parking lot for the school count as, or is that included in the parking lot that doesn't count?
Yes and no. I didn't think I'd get into this particular detail right away, but essentially, they're not credited. However, in the old days, when the school sites were being set aside, they didn't know which acre was going to be for. So they said, okay, 10 acres, 9 of these are credited, and 1's not credited for the parking. So that is historical, and in the FDP, so only 9 of those 10 acres have gotten credit.
Alan?
36% of what?
Of all land zone Newtown.
So is that currently accurately the number, give or take?
Yes, actually, the community has met that test. We're just slightly above 36%.
So if in downtown, there's a parcel, and somebody's going to put, they put a little park, like at Metropolitan, they have their little parks. Is that open space or not?
So, I mean, the land for the like the public park and so forth, where the no, I don't think that is open space. I think, but I'd have to come back and check on that. But essentially, all the things that have been FDP'd already, that's open space. And so I'll have to check and get back to you on that. I think no is the answer. I'll get back to you. So
the bottom part of my question is there land currently out there that could reasonably become open space? And if so, wouldn't that raise the percentage above 36%?
And that's fine. That's a minimum. It's a minimum, so it can be raised.
Could somebody, if it was ended up at 36.5%,
it is.
Could somebody on their own merit say, I'm going to take some of my land out of open space because that'll keep it within 36%?
They'd have to go through an FDP process to do that. So we are slightly above 36%, not 36.5%, and that's very good because sometimes a school that was built in 1973 is now being refurbished. And of course, more parking and travel aisles are required today than there were. And so the school system has to dip into that pot because they have land they have to build upon, so they're taking land that may be credited and using it for parking. So then it can't be, it's not credited. So they have to, we have, luckily as a community, more land that is credited than the 36%. So we are able to do that. Otherwise, we'd have some discussions about that. Any questions more about credited? Then I'm going to go to non-credited. So why is there non-credited? And so we've learned through discussions and history lessons that non-credited, there were discussions at the very early beginning through the Rouse Company wanted to get credit for the school sites for things that they were donating. And so that was given to them, but there were things that they just didn't feel, the commissioners or whatever didn't feel it should be given credit, whether there's parking lots or two of these little small lots and so forth. So they held the line. And so there are lots that are green, but maybe they're not even green, but they have not been given credit. So sometimes you look and you see a sliver of land, CA has a bunch of them, small slivers, and they'll ask, is it credited? And we're like, no, it's not credited. And there's no way you can tell by looking. It's not that it's good or bad necessarily. Sometimes it's just the size. So really what tonight we're talking about mostly is credited. And Jessica's, if you have no more questions about this, I'd like to turn it over to Jessica, who's going to show you a series of maps that she's created that show us where the open space is, both credited and none, and who owns it. And I think you'll be interested to find out some of those results. Jessica?
All right, let me get this situated so you can sort of see the map. I apologize, it's actually hard to capture Columbia as a whole and still let you kind of see where we are. It is green. Okay, there we go. This is my superstar moment. I just want to show you this first map. This is just kind of giving you a basic overview of when we're talking about Newtown zoned open space. The gray highlight is the Columbia area, so that's what we think of as Columbia. That does include Newtown zoned and non-Newtown zoned. As we know, Dorsey Search doesn't have Newtown zoning, so it is included, but it doesn't have that credited or uncredited open space, so I didn't include it in this map. The dark green, that is our credited open space areas. Those count towards that 36% minimum. The bright kind of neon green, those are the non-credited open space areas. So their land use designation, when you look at the final development plans, is as open space, and then it is done as credited or uncredited. And each final development plan has the acreage number of what is credited, what is not credited, and any updates to those final development plans. Basically, if it changes that, it's tracked. And then the sheet that's been handed out to you tonight is the county's tally, where they're keeping track of those acreage when they look at all the plans. Yes.
The large white areas within
Those are
all out parcels?
Yeah, they're all out parcels. Yeah, so we actually didn't include a base map on this because it just made it easier to not have to deal with so many different colors. So it definitely shows you, where our open space is concentrated, and it's throughout. But then where there's large chunks, and then where there's sort of the veins of green space that we all know connects, the backyards of so many of our communities. Are there any questions about this map? All right.
I'm still having a little trouble with non-credited now. If it's non-credited, you can't build on it?
No. Just you're not getting the 36% is part of Newtown zoning. We have to have 36% open space.
So what
It just doesn't qualify. Just think of it as
Well, I mean, as non-qualified, can you do anything on it that you wouldn't be able to do on?
well, that would be up to the FDP, right? The FDP is the zoning for a parcel, so it would tell you.
Why is it called open space?
I think it's just because we don't know what else to call it. I mean, because it is not credited open space. That's what it's called. And as I tried to explain, during those early stages where the developer was trying to get credit for a lot of things, and some of the homeowners association and the commissioners were pushing back on that. So they set that 2-acre minimum. So some of these are just smaller parcels. Yeah. Yes, that's one. They don't meet the size. Many of them don't meet the size. And it may be that they had development on them or parking lot or something like that.
So, Dennis, I mean, you might. When we built the new Long Reach Tennis Club, the club was on open space, but we had to go in and put the parking lot as non-credited, right? So even though the whole facility is on open space,
That's a good example.
It's two parts. There's the credited open spaces where the building and all the other stuff, and then the parking lot itself is actually non-credited. But if you look at it on the FDP, it's all open space. So it's just.
Yeah, you can't get, just because parking doesn't qualify, it's not permitted.
And partly that's if you look at the Howard County's interactive FDP land use map, the FDPs have a more simplified land use than we see if you're looking at the rest of Howard County, because it's that historical land use. And so it's basically single family home, townhome, apartment, commercial, employment, and then I think it goes to open space. And I think those are the fairly limited ones there are. So I think it's just trying to differentiate between the types of open space you see.
Sure.
Yeah, so in looking at the maps, which I did so much of, at the Patuxent Branch Trail, there were portions of it that said CA open space that were actually paved and part of the parking lot, which is part of the Howard County Parks and Rec, but it still said on the map CA open space. Is that another example of non-credited?
I would have to know. I'd have to look at it. I don't know. I can't tell you.
I couldn't make head or
Yeah,
tails of that.
I'd be happy to get back to you on that. But,
Yeah, but community members did ask me and said, well, why does it say CA,
Yeah.
does
So-
CA own this? And
so-
I said, I don't think so.
Yeah. So going forward, if we said during the rezoning update process, you just do. I mean, non-credited is just like. Why do we have it? You know what I mean? It seems, just call it, something, I don't know. But it's because we have this need to keep track, that's why it doesn't get credit for parking lots. You just have to think about it like that. All right.
Janet.
I just actually wanted to point out to the board on this map that in Gateway, half that land is out parcel. So, the land within the Columbia Gateway Loop is all Columbia, but right next to it is all out parcel. So something we'd like, we should probably keep an eye on as that evolves.
No, that is out parcel, that's a whole other discussion. We'll have that another week. So we'll have that another week. But that doesn't mean they're not developed. They're just, they didn't want to be bought by Mr. Rouse.
Right, it's just not Columbia's
Yeah.
property, that's all
Yep.
I'm pointing out.
Okay, so does everyone see the difference, the two main colors, the green? Okay. Very good.
And so the next step we did is we actually compared the final development plans, credited and uncredited open space, took the credited open space and looked at the property information to try to figure out who owns credited open space in Columbia. And CA is the primary owner. We are just above 60% of the total acreage that's credited is ours. That's the bright green. I realize I haven't oriented you the map. Let me do that real quick. This is 95 right here. This is 29. 32 running down here. This looks like a road, but it's actually the utility line that runs by Lake Elkhorn through Owen Brown. And then this is Symphony Woods area right here, just so we have a orientation for anyone who doesn't stare at maps all day like I do. So then the second landowner that we have is Howard County at 20%. Most of the land that they own, something like 634 acres, is in the reserve over here. But they also own little bits throughout. And then the next one, as Jane mentioned in her introductory speech, is the Board of Education properties. And those are the yellow properties. Those are scattered throughout Columbia, but they are a large owner. About 8% of the credited open space is on school sites. These are sites that I think all of them have mostly been developed, and some are held in reserve.
Yes, so some of them are, several in Columbia are still held in reserve.
So one question.
Yes.
So there's not a school
For the
yet.
School side, what is considered open space? The playground or the?
Yeah, I think it's mostly everything but parking and drive aisles.
So the Rouse Company, when they were doing this, they were donating school sites for the community, so they got credit for the entire site with some land for parking. It was not, they didn't get credit for that. So if it's a 10-acre site, probably 9 acres of it is credited open space. And the same, we have some facilities on open space as well, our facilities.
And then, any more questions on that? So then at 5%, the Howard Research and Development comes in owning credited open space. Most of their land is sort of a little bit on the outskirts and a little bit on the inside area of Columbia. And then the pink is the various other owners. So these are sometimes some HOAs own it, some commercial properties are owned that. That's actually State Highway Administration being represented there. And then there are a few unknown areas that, it's less than 1%, so it doesn't even make it into the pie chart calculations. But I didn't want to leave it out. So that is our ownership breakdown of credited open space in Columbia.
And about 5,200 acres in total is the 36%. And that's credit. Non-credit is just a couple hundred acres, just so.
Sorry to ask a Hickory Ridge specific question, but what is the HRD parcel up here that's in Hickory Ridge?
This one, that's Clary's Forest. That's the site.
The school site,
It's
yeah.
a potential school site, but it's owned by HRD.
It's the one that's in discussion with the current FDP
That's okay.
for downtown.
I always thought that was I didn't realize that was HRD owned.
Yeah. Any?
And if you want a little fact, Newtown zoning really hasn't been changed except for downtown and the village process since 1965, except the minimum for open space was originally set at 25%. But then when Rouse changed his mind about developing the middle Patuxent environmental area and instead dedicated it to the county, then they had to change the ordinance and they changed it to 36%. So that's how we got to the funny 36%.
Alrighty. So, and I'll send these maps out so you can kind of zoom in at your leisure and figure out properties. And then the next map we did is Obviously, Columbia doesn't exist in a void, so there are other types of open space around us. So the colors are the same. Newtown credited open space is that dark green. Then our bright green is our non-credited open space. And the sage color that you're seeing at Belander Park, those are the Howard County open space designation. They own that property. It's not part of the Newtown calculations, but clearly it fits within our kind of our environmental areas. And then other open spaces is a lot of those areas that are either owned by the state or those HOAs that had, around our townhomes and things like that, and the apartments.
So in Newtown, we have open space, and it has a definition. Outside of Newtown, the ordinance also talks about open space. Parking is permitted in those, and those are, as she said, publicly owned open space or homeowner open space. We showed on the map just to know that, we're talking about Newtown open space, but the county also has another provision in its zoning ordinance. It's called open space, and they own some, and then privately homeowners association owns them. So we're not the only holders of open space. We just want to share with you that. So if you're making change, if you want to talk about Newtown open space, we have to talk about that, because open space means something else outside of Newtown.
Ginny?
I think you just said that outside of Columbia, open space allows for parking. So if you have parking, it's considered open space outside of Columbia.
Permitted. I think it has to be associated with the. You can't.
HOA or something.
Well, it has to be. It has to. I think the ordinance says it has to be associated with the thing that's on the site. So the parking lot for the facility that's on the site.
Okay. So we are in a way discriminated against. Do you see with the no?
Well, I think if you're going to protect environmental land, that's not a parking lot, right? I mean, that's why we have it in Newtown. The idea was to protect the environmentally sensitive areas, and that's why parking isn't necessarily an environmentally enhancing use.
Well, I'm thinking of the 1 acre on the school lots where they get 9, and we get 9 as credited.
That was historically,
so
yeah.
So we could add that, and we'd get, okay.
I think also to point out when Howard County designates their open space and their publicly available data, they're including parks and recreation areas like Cedar Lane Park, which has all the various facilities on it and the parking areas and things. So they're not always just talking about kind of your ideal of undeveloped open space.
Yeah. Good point. I think that those are our maps for today.
All right. So one of the things is we've got open space. We have 36%. That's with the current Newtown. Zoning changes are coming.
Mm-hmm.
So the question really becomes is, well, I'll say one, do we want to continue to protect open space? I hope you guys say yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
and two, what kind of recommendations do we make? As Jane said, open space outside of Columbia means something a little different than inside Columbia. We've talked about maybe creating a special open space zoning district for Newtown. There are pluses and minuses, as Jane alluded to.
I think it's kind of early. I think it's kind of early to be talking about districts at this early part. I mean, we haven't, that process hasn't started yet, but I think it's an idea to consider as, I don't yet know which way the county's, thinking of going with, how do we deal with these FDPs, and whether we're going to switch to another system. So I just say it's kind of early.
Sure. Chow?
So I have two questions. One, how big is that difference? For example, the parking lot, and some counted open space, some not counting open space, right? How much percentage of parking lot in designated open?
Okay, is your question of parking lots on outside of Newtown?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know.
So another question is like in Columbia, a lot of places have been built up, like fully built, right? And for example, in Neutral Hill, I didn't see there any space to build anything. So that will not impact the village of Rural Hill if any changes come to zoning. Is that how we explain that? Or other villages, some villages have been fully built and there's no much space to build anything. Does that change actually the open space?
So I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, we're 30, the 36 and some percent is probably, we're not going to do too much better than that. There's, all the rest of the land is either developed. Now, somebody could have a large parcel like the Smith Farm, say, if somebody had land and it was supposed to be for residential and they decided to give it all, to the Parks Department or something. But I think there's only one small area of Newtown land that hasn't been FDP'd. And if I'm not mistaken, it is near the gateway, and it's called the Sawtooth parcel. It's quite a big parcel, but it's totally not developable. It has no road access, or I don't know how it would ever get road access. It has utilities, steep slopes, some other things. And so it's never been developed. So if it were to be, or Howard Hughes decided to give it over to, either CA or somebody else, I think some of that could be open space, but otherwise I don't think there's anything else that I'm familiar with that hasn't been FDP'd, so we know what the total open space percentage is going to be.
Alan?
We learned the other day that every parcel has right under law to have road access.
Yes, so that's why on that parcel that has no road access, I guess, it'll have to get it somehow through another parcel or something. But it is totally landlocked. Pardon? Yeah, it's not even subdivided, right? It's not. Yeah. So, but otherwise, so we're at 36.1%, and that's good, as I said, because sometimes when a school site or something needs to redevelop and they want to build more parking, they have to kind of go back to the bank here and find 2 acres. And so it's good that the county keeps track of the 36% and that we're over it. But I don't see, except for the Sawtooth parcel, I don't see any change in that. It's not you can't get to 40%.
Actually, I worry the other way, that there may be some parcels out there that certain owners might decide, since we already are at 36.1, maybe I can rezone them. Change the FDP to something different.
I guess somebody could do that for a few acres, and it could be permitted because it's But as long as it could happen, in the future that could happen. But it's not something I foresee.
And I would say that, having looked at all these FDPs, a lot of the open space designations, that is the entirety of a single FDP. There's not a mix of uses on that property. So I think it's just going to be important to, as we're translating the FDPs into a different format, ensure that those properties are correlated to what is happening in other open space areas. But I don't think there's going to be the same thing if your land use is already just open space, that you're necessarily going to see an opportunity to translate it to something else.
Nope. Sorry.
Yeah, by the same token, is it possible for something that is designated, for example, in Gateway, if a building wasn't being used or didn't have a tenant and a building came down, could that revert to open space or parkland? In other words, could an office place be turned into a park?
Hypothetically, a developer could give their land to a public entity. It certainly, as an office building, doesn't look a lot like environmental and parkland. But, philosophically, conceptually, that could occur, sure. You have to go rezone the land, in order to donate it.
Well, in terms of that, just in terms of the previous presentation about thinking about creating,
Right.
recreating space
Right,
there,
right.
that is one of the things that people have looked at, that older buildings have come down, been turned into pocket parks. They become places for food trucks. There are lots of things like that happening in older cities.
I don't see that in, the Gateway has those buildings from the 1970s, certainly the GE sites, but it's not like they're totally decrepit, and some of those buildings are pretty hardy. They're several stories. They're only built, some of them built in the 90s, but they're still pretty sturdy. But yeah, sure, that could happen. Sure. We do have a lot, we do have some open space in Gateway, so it's not like they don't have any.
American cities. I mean, they're doing that with American cities right in downtown.
Oh, yes, that building. Yeah,
So-
yep.
But that brings up a good point, because if you think of how the downtown plan regulations were built, there is no new open space in downtown. Okay, they froze, because they said, but what they required was downtown parkland, downtown public squares.
In each neighborhood.
And so it looks like open space, but it's not actually really open space per open. So when they tear down the American Cities building and they put that new square, it will fall under the downtown parkland, but it's not open space. So it's another thing to think about.
It's not even uncredited open space?
It's not credited, it's not open space.
So it won't add to the 36%.
It won't add to the 36%. That's how they did the regulations for downtown. And you could see it on one of your maps when you looked at Merriweather, because Merriweather and Symphony Woods was green, but those other 4 parcels were not. They are not open space, but they are part of the downtown parkland. So,
But could that change under the new development?
sure, it could, but if you're rewriting the regulations and you're going to changing things, but it's just something to think about. That downtown, when you start seeing these plazas and like the new Veterans, that's not really open space. It's going to look like open space. It's going to look exactly like our lakefront, but technically it's not open space.
Oh, what is wrong with that? Is your point that,
As long as you keep it in mind.
Yeah, but I mean,
don't
is
think
your
that it
point
has.
that if it were accredited open space, it would stay permanently unless the rules change? So is that your point? Because otherwise, what's wrong with
the
that?
others are-
I don't see what's wrong.
The other parks are a requirement of the zoning also, so
Right.
it's not just an extra thing. They're required to have those.
So what?
And I do want to point out, this isn't the entirety of open space that's even on Columbia land. This is just the space that has to be credited to maintain the minimum of 36% that's required by the zoning.
But the other is only 200 acres. I mean, it's so small in many parcels. Yeah, don't worry about it.
All right, so any other questions? Okay, Greg.
Is that it? I say, is that it? I didn't mean it, because it's great information, but
So I'm asking the board.
what's that?
Asking the board, what would you like?
Okay, because I'd just be interested in, okay, this is the current regime. We have this minimum 36% of all of this land that's currently zoned Newtown has to be, what are the, leading options for replacing that regime as we go forward?
Well, I would say you'd want to keep the 36%, obviously. The only, if we're staying with the FDP system, this is kind of what we got, and we have to do this mapping and so forth. The other thing that I guess I've said I think it's too early to talk about would be if you're going Newtown residential, Newtown industrial, you'd have Newtown open space, a zoning district. And then it'd be mapped, and then you'd see it. And we wouldn't have to go through, is it, credited or non-credited, because you'd see it, and it's credited, right?
There would be no minimum under that standard.
Well, we'd have to find a way to, to figure that out, like no loss of, open space, or no loss, maybe it's acreage rather than percent, right? It's just easier to do that. And the county does track the acreage. That's what they track. And this sheet that, there's no percents on here. You do the percent yourself. You do the calculation. So I think you still could calculate it. I don't know of any other way but maybe that, the consultants may have other ideas. Again, I just think it's not clear to me what other alternatives, how the county might think of moving away from the FDPs. Moving away from the FDPs and trying to do this other is really complicated. I'm just saying it's not an easy thing to do this Newtown residential. It's just because all we have is all mixed up on many. Residential would be easy, but all the others, so I'm not sure if there's still another solution that might be better than Newtown residential, Newtown. Or maybe it's good for residential, but the other districts, they're all mixed. It's just like we're seeing on these parcels where a new use is asked for, and by golly, you open it up and it says, shopping centers are permitted. Well, who knew, right? But so moving away will be quite difficult. So I'm still looking for the consultant. Maybe there's a third way. So, but I'm not. I just think there's such a importance to the open space to this community, and that's why we're here, because it was an issue that came up, and we wanted to make sure that you knew where it was and how the regime works. I have to say I'm not a fan of the minimum and maximums going forward. All the others, we have a city. I mean, I don't want some czar telling one person they can't have a new shop or they can't have a new office because it goes above the percentage, or we can't have one more office building. But I do think that the open space as a total acreage needs to be kept for Columbia.
How do you have a plan if you can't have somebody saying there are minimums and maximums? And
Yeah, there are no other city in the whole country that has one zoning district for it, and over the whole city, the planning director or the construction manager says, "Whoops, nope, you can't build that apartment building because we have too many." You're going to tip the scales at 102 versus 101. I think cities grow and they change, and I think it's really important to do that. So
there are any other questions about open space? Because what I wanted to do was make sure that the board was aware of what the open space was and who in particular owned it. Because there's always kind of the assumption, at least in the community, that we own, CA owns all the open space, and it's not quite correct. And I certainly get the sense from the board that we definitely want to protect open space. We want to protect what we have.
I hope that's not a shock to you, Andy.
I hope not.
Well, also, I think we need to understand is that I don't think there's anyone's going to come in and try to take the open space from us. So
Yeah.
you say protect open space. I think that it's not going to be taken away from Columbia. It's part of the 36% there.
Yeah.
Unless the county rezones it.
No, I don't think I don't see that as an issue that the county is going to rezone the open space.
Well, is it even buildable? I mean, it's probably none of it is buildable, so why even,
No, most of it's not buildable.
Sure.
I was going to ask, is it possible to get a printed map? I think this is something our village boards would like to take a look at. We'll discover maybe different things in our villages that we didn't know about. So that would be very helpful.
Yeah,
even these. You remember you did an open space assessment?
Yes.
Or master plan? I think this
Yes.
was in there.
So that didn't take a look at zoning. Oh, yes. What all of our holdings are in that assessment. But if you want the previous map, I'm assuming is what you want, the credited open space. This one.
Well, actually, the other one I think is both of them are really.
And the one before that.
Just to be able to explain what our discussion here has been about.
I think that's valuable. I just want to always caution when you're staring at a GIS map that an issue of projection could throw off a property line very easily. So don't use it to say this is definitively where the line is at all. It's.
Well, this is conceptual.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's fine. And we can give you the digital map so you can zoom in on it, and we could also order prints as well, if you would like
And
that.
the larger print has been helpful, I think, for the village boards.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane, Jessica. By the way,
And
next
Jessica.
month it's out parcels.
Oh,
Talk about out parcels.
Good.
Yeah, but can I just say something?
Yep, sure.
Maybe just for the next time, the part of this I would definitely appreciate is presentation of options, again, because this is supposed to be part of the rewrite, right, in phase 2. Okay, this is great. This is our open space. We all love open space. These are our out parcels. We all like out parcels. Maybe, maybe not. But, you know, just a sort of a presentation at the end of, okay, here are the likely options, you know, given what the consultant has said, you know, you can, you know, like you said, rewrite the FDPs to do da-da-da. If that happens, you know, here's what could happen with either open space or without parcels. Just so it's not free-floating information, just so it's sort of tethered to what we're doing here.
Okay, Milton?
Dennis, are you ready?
Yes.
Your time has been cut in half because
So I have a short PowerPoint. Before I begin that, I'd like to say just a few words. So our goal was to restore and to preserve the woods. And I attended a post event in Symphony Woods, and I heard an interesting comment from one of the attendees, which was, there was no grass, it was dirt. And what they said was, well, let's bring in HTI. They can grow grass in asphalt. And I'm thinking, well, that's not a sustainable long-term plan for the woods. It doesn't make any sense. That's not what we're looking to do long-term. And when you go through the woods now, there are trees that are stressed. There are blades of grass that are fighting for their life, and there are deeply eroded streams. So going forward, if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to get the same result. And so we have to do something different. And so this long-term management plan is not about redesigning the woods. It's about how we manage it going forward for the benefit of residents in perpetuity. We engaged a multidisciplinary environmental firm, Water Studies and Solutions, that brought in outside consultants for turf, for streams, and for trees. We spent countless hours meeting with our partners, the IMA, IAT, Downtown Columbia Partnership, Howard County Park and Rec, because the point is that we can create a great solution by putting a fence around the woods and not letting anyone in, and it'll be preserved in perpetuity, and it'll be really nice. But part of the solution is to find a way to better activate the park, and I think that's what we're working towards. But I'd like to also say that I brought along part of the open space team, some of who you know, who each have a unique perspective that they added to the discussion. Daniel DeMore is the Open Space Operations Division Director, and he has a lot of history in terms of managing how we manage the woods before IAT. Jan Clark is CA's landscape architect. Al Edwards is CA's civil engineer. And new to our team, and I'm very excited to say, is Nick Moonaghan, who probably knows more about grass than everyone in Columbia combined. So with that being said, well, that may change. And then we asked Timothy Prigg to manage, to act as CA's project manager in terms of bringing this all together. And Tim, do you want to?
Sure.
Jan, what's going on?
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you all for the opportunity. I realized preparing for this that I've worked on Columbia Association projects for nearly 3 decades. I think Dennis Matty was sitting in a lifeguard chair when I started. What we're presenting this evening is a result of a collaborative effort with significant contributions from the team that Dennis mentioned, and it also extends to the stakeholders and the CA team. The scope of this project is the roughly 20 acres that sits north of the Merriweather Pavilion, and it's highlighted on the drawing. The park, of course, has central prominent location in the community. It's a total of about 36 acres with about 1,400 trees. The multiple stakeholders and a potentially robust schedule are some of the challenges.
Why didn't you look at the area below?
This was where the activity was taking place now, and so we cordoned that off. We believe that the area to the south will have its own challenges in the future as those properties come online.
Those properties meaning?
The southern portion, the crescent
Crescent is
golf.
outside of.
That's
the
correct.
woods,
But that crescent will have more impact on this donut in the future with activities and pressures. Our task involved understanding the physical and environmental features, the environmental limitations, and the impacts of the uses and events. The next step, or task 2, will be to develop management guidelines that will help us define and direct the uses to sustain and protect the park, as Dennis said.
Do we have the ability to do that, or would that be subject to Inner Harbor?
So we will be defining these management guidelines in the interim process, I guess, between now and the next phases of the development. So we want to preserve it. So we want to look at ways that we can affect the way the facility is used.
I want to do that too, and my question is, and Sherry's not here, so we don't have the legal word on it, but do we as CA have the ability, I understand you're working with IA and the hopeful outcome is it's a joint collaborative thing, but if push comes to shove, do we, who are paying, I guess, for this effort, have the ability to tell the Inner Harbor Corporation this is how the park's going to be managed?
So if I could say real quick, so the agreement with IAT calls for them to properly maintain the woods, and we're defining how that is, what that says. So yes, I think the answer is yes.
Around that, thank you.
So we realized that to maintain this healthy, sustainable park, we need to maintain a balance between biological and physical components as well as the activities. And so let's take a look at the park. These are familiar views, beautiful fall color, spring green up, the dappled sunlight playing off the daffodils and the turf, but there's more to this picture. We have a soil system and an ecology that exists below the surface with tree roots that extend well beyond the drip line. We have a soil system with an ecology that exists below the surface with the tree roots, We have various soils, overland and focused drainage patterns on the site, and the activities from the dog walker to the festivals. Sometimes the activities can get intense. And when that happens, these festivals are rain or shine events, so when they coincide with poor weather conditions, we can have an overload. If a photo's worth 1,000 words, then a video must be worth more. This is a short video from the Jazz Fest.
Did you all just happen to have this footage, or did you take this for this purpose?
It was deliberate. So it was sort of the perfect storm this year, and we were left with the aftermath. There was damage to the soils, the turf, and the biological communities, as well as significant reconstruction costs for the users. Again, our system was out of balance. Specifically, our task for this project was to inventory and assess the existing conditions on the site, and from that information we were to develop recommendations for improvements. To be prudent with our time, I'm going to go over this inventory fairly quickly and move into our recommendations, hopefully leaving some time for discussion. Healthy soils are critical to a healthy and sustainable site, and we found compacted soils with reduced infiltration rates and limited air circulation, a diminished soil biology that will ultimately continue to contribute to long-term decline and increased hazards with the vegetation. The site may at one time have been a forest habitat. Today it would be described more correctly as a developed woodland. The density of the trees on the site is about 38 trees per acre. That's well below the 100 trees per acre that is defined by the state of Maryland. There are about a dozen species found on the site, and of the roughly 1,400 trees, we understand that we're losing about 10 to 12 per year. On this drawing, the dots represent the location of trees greater than 6 inches. The orange dots indicate the trees that the arborist identified as stressed. What stresses trees? It's not really clear-cut. The cause can include all sorts of things, including soil compaction, drought, flooding, or mechanical injuries, and it typically takes years for those impacts to be expressed. When you look at the proximity of the stressed trees to each other, a pattern begins to develop. Sometimes when you're looking at trees, you don't realize that the tree is stressed. This is a tree that on one side it's a beautiful American beach, and when you come around the other side you can see that there's some real issues. When a tree becomes a risk, it needs to be removed. All the activities on the site benefit from healthy, sustainable turf. How do you get it? You increase the sunlight, you alleviate the compaction, you build soil structure, which takes quite a while, and you increase the inputs with expanded cultural practices. This is the result of soil compaction and poor drainage and concentrated pedestrian circulation. Site drainage, we saw the impacts. There are also opportunities to utilize stormwater management and stream restorations to convert some of these liabilities into assets. These are some images of the existing eroded streams. And this is a stream restoration project that was done by Wetlands. And the image on the left looks very similar to our condition. And the image on the right is the finished product, turning these liabilities into assets. Again, there are a large range of activities on the park, from passive dog walkers to picnickers and festivals. The park should meet everybody's needs. The events bring heavy use and are the greatest challenge. This is Wine in the Woods layout. The blue rectangles indicate the major tents. The brown areas are wood chip mulch, and the blue lines are the protective matting that were used to protect the soils. The activities tend to be focused. There may be an opportunity to spread things out in the greener areas and reduce the impacts. We can also see a correlation between those activity zones and these hotter areas of stressed trees. These are some of the, take you through the Wine in the Woods park activation. This is pathway laying down the protective matting, and then the matting comes up. And then the jazz festival happens. Then we have restoration. This is the area by the restrooms, primarily pedestrian traffic, and the water, and the restoration. This one is very interesting. This slide was taken before anything happened in the spring, and you can see really the poor turf, the compacted soils, and then we put the tent up, the people come, people leave, we take the tent down and restore it, but what we're left with is significant soil compaction. Refusal at about 3 inches. We're out of balance. How do we get back into balance? We broke our recommendations down into three areas. The first option are the minor tweaks to the procedures that currently take place. Wood chips are an effective and stable surface in areas where it's difficult to establish a turf, and it appears to help reduce compaction potential. Providing mulch rings at the base of trees can protect them from mechanical damage, and shredding leaves, considering leaf management, we could consider shredding leaves and placing them in the mulch ring instead of hauling them off-site. And then intensify the turf renovation and fertilization activities in the fall, and have that happen a little bit earlier so that we get a good stand of turf overwintering and ready for the activity in the spring. And finally, canopy management, looking for opportunities where we could modify the canopy, open it up, and let a little bit more light come into the to the turf. So working with stakeholders, we realized the value of permanent pathway network that could support pedestrian circulation and reduce the impacts associated with event operations. The background image here is the SDP, and Dennis is going to talk a little bit about this plan.
The green trail alignment is the trail that the Columbia Association Board funded, and that's the one that would have to be approved by the Columbia Association Board. I've walked that orientation in the field, and what I'm going to do is have all of these pathways staked in the field and then invite the board out to walk them in their entirety. But from my initial walk, I looked at the green pathway, and it occurred to me, in the field, when you walk that loop around the future playground area doesn't really make sense. It might make sense in the future when there's a playground there, but you'll see it when you're out in the field.
What pathway did we fund?
The green, the LPP to Chrysalis pathway.
We funded that.
Well, you
approved
put,
funding for that.
the board did.
The board did. Or was that the one that we approved if you come back with a plan that we approve of?
That's why we're going to walk it.
Okay, so we didn't fund it. We may fund it if we approve it.
Well, you funded, so you funded, we had to do some engineering, so you have funded some of it, but it won't be
It's in a
implemented
lockbox
until you approve it.
Right. And only Dick has the key.
We haven't put it in yet.
That path.
Right. But in any event.
In fact, that was the proposed path, and we rejected that. We said, come back with a plan that we can approve.
Which I think when we walk in the woods, it's probably that new orientation. But, so sometime in early November, when all the pathways are staked out, I'll send out an invite, and we'll walk them as a group.
They're partially staked out now, if anybody wants to.
Well, the path that is staked, we got to be clear about what's out there, because we don't want to have misconceptions. The pathway that's staked out there, as I understand it, is the SDP alignment. So, is that right, Jan?
That's right. So we wanted to see what that looked like as a starting point, and so that's what's staked in the field.
Okay.
And so what's interesting when you walk in the field and you see where the stakes are, you also see that there wasn't a lot of coordination with the existing tree canopy, which I think we can do in the field. In any event, the other pathways are, so the blue pathway is proposed to be funded by Howard County Parks and Rec. The, what I call magenta. Some people might call it purple. But that pathway is to potentially be funded by IMA, and the little bit of orange is to be funded by the Downtown Columbia Partnership, or potentially funded by them. And so we spent a lot of time, and we started with the approved IAT, we call it the approved IAT plan, and we tried to kind of coordinate these pathways with that plan, understanding that when those pathways were originally laid out, they weren't laid out with as much attention to tree canopy and where the trees are as they might otherwise have been. In addition to which, the use of the woods isn't completely consistent with the original IAT plan. So these were laid out taking, the blue pathway. Howard County spends a lot of money restoring the woods after Wine in the Woods. And the problem is it's a really temporary solution. We have about 3 inches of topsoil that in a rain turns to mush. We don't have good root structure. And so that all falls apart. And then we followed up immediately with JazzFest. And then that, we grow grass and asphalt. It looks green, but in reality it's not sustainable. And then might rain again, and then that turns to mush. And so the pathways are part of the solution because they keep a lot of the traffic off the turf. In addition to which, if this was all to go in, I got everyone to agree that we would close off what really is the major turf area for a period. They could all work around closing off the major turf area for full restoration over the course of a year, so we could encourage deep root structure instead of just working with the top 3 inches, and have a long-term solution.
A question. There is an existing road that runs from the parking lot down into the heart of the park. It's a gravel road. Is there any interest in preserving that? When I talked to the county, they said that's how you get the trucks in there to put the temporary stages, the tents and things in the porta potties and everything. So would that be preserved, or would that?
It would be preserved. So it's shown on the plan as existing gravel road. Mm-hmm. And
no, I see it on the plan.
And so my thought.
None of the proposed pathways seem to utilize it.
They do. And my thought was I was trying to stretch the dollars as far as I could. And that's already a gravel road, and it could possibly turn into a pathway.
Good.
But it works for the purpose it's out there right now. So in order to stretch the dollars as far as I could, the thought was to leave that in place and not spend money paving what's a gravel road already.
Yeah.
So just because someone's willing to pay for a road doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best place for it. So this Magenta IMA road concerns me. It's right smack dab through the middle of that whole piece. I'm not sure that serves any purpose other than for Merriweather.
Well, it certainly, so there are a lot of different stakeholders in the woods, right? And I think everyone has the same goal, which is to activate the woods. Now, they have different reasons,
I'm
right?
not sure they
So,
have the
so
same
some of them,
goals.
they want to make a lot of money, and others are doing it for the public good. But everyone wants to act. I think they all want people in the park. We want people in the park. And that magenta little bit of pathway, that is a highly used travel path. And if they're going to continue to use the woods for events, at least for the, let's call it the midterm. I don't know that this is like the 100-year solution, but it's a good midterm solution while everything else is happening and until the IAT plan is fully developed. Pathways aren't permanent, but for the way that I could see the woods being used for the next 10 to 15 years, this will help us preserve the woods and to restore the turf and the trees, and at some point we have to work on the streams.
And it was a potential, not a final. It was really just to look at how you get from one part, where the needs were from one part to the other. I think we would see all of these lines being adjusted slightly or largely to fit within the park itself. We were really looking at circulation and how it was being used, not as much of where the specific path would go. And that path is probably the more awkward of.
I find
of
it
that.
incredibly awkward, and I think it really inhibits what, as this park evolves, that pathway chops up the space in a way that I think makes the rest of that piece
Well,
less usable.
I think when you're out there and you see the gray line to the right that is on the original plan, when you're out there, you might say that that path, that location has its set of problems as well. But I think it will take more study to define these paths to the proper location so that they work together. But I think where we were was getting this consensus that, hey, if we all work together, we can get this network where the pressures on the trees and the grass and the mud are reduced by this network of pathways. That circulation pattern is important, as Dennis says, for the operation or the way.
I understand
the
if it has more of a purpose than simply to allow vehicles to drive through the woods. That's my concern.
So we also looked at the turf renovation initiative and what Dennis was talking about, and we would, significantly aerate the subsoils and improve the turf. Also, compaction mitigation could take place with for the trees. This is a diagram showing that turf renovation area in green, but really that would start with the drainage, because as you saw in a lot of those slides, one of the major problems is that the soils are so puddled that there's no infiltration, and so to improve the surface drainage would be a valuable way to get that turf to be able to stand up to the activity. And also the blue dots indicate irrigation connections, because when we go out and plant the turf, we generally hit a dry spell, and so we need water. And then finally, the magenta dashed line is stream restoration that would actually be part of the third section. As far as the compaction mitigation, we would start with trees probably in those hot zones, and then identify other individual trees that would need or would be well served by that deep compaction mitigation. So we talked a little bit about the stream restoration. The final thought was to create a festival turf area, and this is a little bit extreme, but maybe we could identify a portion of the site where these festivals could occur, and develop a soil profile that could support the heavy use with irrigation and drainage. And then this was a round number cost estimate, just to give you some basis of magnitude on the items. And then open it up for questions.
Can you go back to previous slide?
Yeah.
On the mountain. So there are 4 tasks there, right? Which one is the highest priority?
Well, the blue ones are really all part of that option 2, and they would all work together. So the first thing I think would be the drainage improvements. That would be the first in sequence, not necessarily a higher priority than the compaction mitigation, but it would be the first in the sequence. So we would install the drainage improvements, and then do that turf development that would involve the irrigation, and then the compaction mitigation on the trees. The third option would be the stream restoration, and that's something that would be down the road and would probably be funded from a variety of sources.
I see. So I have one question about the grass, right? Consider like Centennial Park, they have a lot of light, like sunlight, but Symphony Woods, we don't have enough sunlight, right? There's a huge difference when you grow grass. Is there any specialized grass for that kind of field? Or?
Well, Nick could help answer that question, but you're right. I mean, one of the primary necessities for good rich turf growth is sunlight. So I think if the intensity is going to be there, part of what would need to happen is looking at opening that area up and maybe, like I said, defining the areas that we want to use intensely, open that up and develop a sunnier area. Even in that movie, you could see that even the open area had that sort of constant shade pattern moving through. Now, I think we can do a better job than we do today, and I think Nick would agree, but that certainly improved sunlight, improved drainage, improved sunlight, improved soils. I mean, we are destroying those soils. The soils out in front of the restroom area there, that is just completely puddled, and the organic material there and the chemicals and the minerals are all there, but there's a soil is a living and breathing organism that has the PEDs and that is completely destroyed.
Ginny?
Yeah. A constituent asked me to ask you guys this question. Isn't there some type of grass that you can grow in a shaded area?
Well, again, the hard fescues, the fine leaf fescues are things that grow better in the shade. You know, if you go to Home Depot, you can buy your shade mix, and that's some of what we put down there this year. So yes, there are varieties that can grow. The downside is it's not a resilient turf. It doesn't stand up to that heavy use. So we've got to look at kind of cheating the system and bringing in some of those hardier fescues and trying to get them to grow beyond their comfort zone.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dick, any?
I think you've done a very nice job here. The big question, I'm totaling this up, $1,710,000. According to the easement, this is Inner Arbor's responsibility.
So I believe we have maintenance responsibilities of the areas that we're talking about until 2023. 2024. The other piece of this is that my hope is that we've brought John McCoy in to help us with the stream restoration in terms of trying to find state or county government money, which we have found for other areas. So my thought is we carve out that piece of it and start looking for money from other sources for that one for sure.
Does the State Highway Administration have any more of those grants they're giving out?
I'm always looking for money.
Yeah, we got that. What, 2.3 million?
Highway through it, or
no, we did. What,
they would get credits for it.
Yeah, Alan and in charge.
Given that you're saying this is our responsibility, is it within the scope of the easement that we tell the county and Inner Arbor and IMA or whoever else, we're doing this? You need to not, it's going to take this amount of time to do, this amount of time to recover, or whatever it takes.
We had that discussion with IMA, with IAT, with Howard County Parks and Rec before we brought this to you tonight, because it doesn't work unless they all agree to that. And they have all agreed to that.
Agreed to what?
Agreed to, you're talking about carving out an area and reducing usage or
I'm saying that this isn't my field. I make this assumption that to do some or all of this is going to mean nobody can use this for a while. It's
certain areas, yes, that's exactly right. And they've all
had
agreed.
the ability, since this is our responsibility, to tell, for example, the county, no, you can't have wine in the woods from X to X because we're going to be doing this during this?
So they would run a reduced Wine in the Woods. They wouldn't eliminate Wine in the Woods, but we would close off a portion of Symphony Woods, and it wouldn't be available to anyone.
Is that at our discretion, or is this?
They all-
understand
well,
the best
I-
thing is a collaborative agreement, but
They all
lacking a
collaborated and
collaborative
said yes.
agreement- Yeah, but it's easy to say yes in the abstract. It's harder to say yes in the, here's the dates we need to do this, given the this, or the weather happened, we couldn't do what we wanted to do, we need to extend it. All those things happen. Is that in our purview to say this is happening, or do we have to go
I don't
by
think
their-
that we would go forward with spending this amount of money unless we had a firm agreement from all the parties that they would agree to.
Milton wants to
Alan,
answer
if we're going to go forward with that and do something like that, we would have some type of agreement that would serve as a document committing the parties to what we say we would do.
We want to make sure that our interests are protected in terms of.
We always
making
dare
this
to
work
protect CA's interests.
Sorry.
I understand this year that about $8 million went to Meriwether for renovations and such. So I think that this is very much in line with building that entire area, which is so very critical to the whole downtown plan. This is a very critical piece. So I think that's another thing that we have to look at in the future if it's a matter of contacting the state delegation. There are lots of things that can be done as we build this out to the future, because you don't want to do just one piece and not do the surrounding piece, and I think that's pretty much understood by leadership. So I don't think we're really in this totally alone. But I think we have to keep thinking about building those relationships and collaborations, and I really want to thank you for moving ahead with doing this and working with all the parties involved. I think this is a much improved plan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't see any more questions. So as Dennis said, they will stake out pathways for the board, and they'll let you know when they come. And then it is on our November agenda for approval of the pathway location. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your waiting, and I knew we were going to run over time. I mean,
Everyone remember that Dennis, we still have a hard hat tour for any board members who want to attend on Saturday morning.
10 o'clock, right?
Oh, parking is going to
10
be an
o'clock,
issue
right?
because of early voting.
Actually, I
Just
think
be
that
prepared.
you'll-
Oh, I'll vote on my way.
Oh, yeah.
And we meet at the athletic club.
Yes, athletic club.
Not at the swimming
Hey,
pool.
Nancy, you're right.
Okay.
Hard hats for everyone.
It'll be a mess.
okay.
Way on the other
Any
side
questions
of
on the
Safeway.
tracking forms? Nope. Anything?
Two.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm looking at the first page of the tracking log. I see a number of items that don't have origination dates, don't have assigned tos, don't have due dates.
What are you looking?
Oh, I think that was
How can
supposed.
we track them
I
if
think that
they're-
was supposed to be
They were all
dot dot
units.
dot dot. They were all chows.
They were all done with that.
Oh, okay.
They're all chows.
Then
Yeah.
I don't care who's,
So you
who
want
originated is I don't care. It's the
date.
Okay.
So all of that should be just
subparts of line 4.
right. They're all subparts of line
In the
4.
future, if we can make sure that's clear.
Okay, good point.
Thank you.
Oh my God, sitting
All right.
for all those hours.
Talking points.
The board voted to authorize spending up to $250,000 for replacement bridge at Fairway Sales Golf Course.
Up to 200.
Up to 250. Up to 250.
$50,000.
Oh, so you said 250, okay.
She said up to.
To approve the easement request from Howard County associated with the Tustin Ranch Trail, subject to staff review of the final construction documents and legal agreements, and CA approval of the landscaping plan. Approve 3 easements from Howard County. Approve the FY19 charges for the Climate Change and Sustainability Advisory Committee. And the board received presentations on Gateway as an innovation district, CA's process of responding to queries from the public addressed to the board, types of open spaces in Columbia, and capital projects in the Symphony Woods update.
Thank you, Valerie. Looks like you got it. Alan?
I have a request. I don't know who printed this email.
I heard about that.
It's Just to use, I may assume it may have been you.
The,
I would
polls,
appreciate,
couldn't go
we all
today.
have been given electronic devices by CA to use for this. Why kill more trees by printing things out? Why not just forward it
She
to
didn't
us?
send it to me till this afternoon.
So forward it to us and we can access it through our electronic devices.
Will do.
Thank you.
All right, hearing no objection, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your time.